Welcome to Strange Familiars. Allison.
Yes.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Got a Christmas episode tonight.
That's timely.
The first of two this week. We're with Monster Fuzz.
This is the one filled with levity and blasphemy.
I don't think too much blasphemy. Anyway, on tonight's show, with Monster Fuzz, we're going to be talking about the weird lights of Christmas. Some strange light sightings from around the time of Christmas, including the Egryn lights from Wales. It's a really interesting flap of weird lights that appeared around this Mrs. Jones and continued for quite some time. But they started right around Christmas, but then they continued on throughout the year. I think they started in 1904 and went into 1905. It's pretty interesting. Before we get to that, I do want to mention Kaya.life, Kiya.life. That is the nonprofit that we're trying to help, that we were supporting on up to episode 500 and beyond, of course. And a couple of people told us they were having trouble donating. They were getting a message that they couldn't donate there. One of our listeners looked into it. Thank you, Abby. And talked to them. And there was a problem with their website or something. Anyway, it's fixed now. Whatever was going on is fixed now. So if you were trying to donate to Kaya.life and you couldn't before, it seems like it's fixed. Please go ahead and support them. Like I said, they're a local nonprofit. They live at Pine Ridge. They're not an outside organization. They live right there. They're doing good work. Kaya.life, Kiya.life. And thanks for helping if you can, if you already have, or if you're going to. Thanks so much. And one more thing before we get to the weird lights, just a call for stories. Of course, if you have a weird story and you want to share it on Strange Familiars, I'd love to talk with you. Email strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. Always want to hear stories, always want to talk to witnesses of strange things. But for those of you who maybe aren't comfortable on coming on the shows, every now and then we'll do a listener story show where we read your stories. If you want to send in your stories, you can send them to that same email address, strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. Put something in the subject like story to read or something like that, so I know what it is. That'll help me out, and we'll put together coming up another show where we read listener stories.
Yeah, and you don't have to be identified in any way that way, right?
You can be anonymous, or if you're just not comfortable, speaking on a recording, we'll go ahead and read it for you. So again, the email address is strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's go ahead and get to the weird lights. It's a long one, but I think it's a good one. Welcome to Strange Familiars and
Monster Fuzz.
Yeah,
that's our podcast. Wait, what?
Fuzzy Familiars once again for Christmas. Feliz Navidad.
Merry Christmas, fellas! You're in your Christmas sweaters.
We outdone you again this year, folks. I mean, the people that don't have video are going to be missing out. But I have my nice Jurassic Park one.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Venom Christmas jumper. I will say this though, there's a reason people only wear these once a year. They're massively, wildly uncomfortable. Yeah. And the amount of heat I'm generating is severely uncomfortable.
And I'm drinking port, and Eamonn's also on the port. We've had mulled wine, but we're on to port for now. Do you guys drink much over Christmas? I don't know if you guys are drinkers. I don't know if we've had that conversation.
I'm a hard cider guy.
Yeah.
But I'm very much a lightweight for a big fella. I'm a cheap date. I'll tell you that. One or two hard ciders and I'm good.
What about you, Allison?
Oh no, not very much. No.
No.
I'm not. No.
even over Christmas, you wouldn't be tempted, no, because it's very much like in Ireland. It's very much intertwined with our cultures. Like, as a matter of fact, people that wouldn't drink year round would definitely drink at Christmas.
Sometimes, I mean, I think there have been years when Tim has told me that I should not do, because I think it just kind of exacerbates some bad habits. so
Allison and Jin got a little too friendly over the pandemic.
Jin, they're called Mother's Ruin, That's the name on it. Have you ever heard that?
What is it called? Mother's Ruin?
Yeah, Mother's Ruin, yeah. It used to be a thing where they used to say that it was like the housewives drink, where basically like gin would put you in a really bad depression if you drank it. And I can attestify to that. I found gin to be a very downer type of drink.
Yeah.
It is, but for like the 5 minutes that you feel good, it's really good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I like my body adapts really well to alcohol. Like it's we get on great. I'm like kind of like Snow White, when she sings like, "Oh, the blue ticks." I'm like that, but with whiskey and Guinness and stuff. Like it works great.
Is it just maybe your bones are hollow and just you have so so much
That's
extra
it.
height
it's actually
that you can
called-
fill up
I
with
think-
alcohol?
I think it's called hereditary alcoholism.
Yeah, but hard cider's definitely a good choice.
Yeah, it is.
I like
this
I
time
like
of
a
year as
cider.
well. That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the weird lights of Christmas, which I wanted to call the strange. I always want to use the term strange, but as the title of my podcast is Strange Familiars, I feel like I'm doing double duty then if I call it. So we're going to call it the weird lights of Christmas.
And these are not coming from the drones in New Jersey.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We should talk about these after all this, by the way. This should be this should be our special.
There is a sighting in our county.
Yeah, I
Really?
believe it. I believe it.
We just did we just recorded before this, but we spent a lot of time trying to figure out you were like, okay, so it's 5 or 6 possible things, blah blah blah. I think where I'm landing on it now, without giving away everything, is I think there's actual UAPs, and I think they're trying to bombard us with stuff so we don't see the actual UAPs for some reason. And I don't know why I think that, because they've also released UAP footage, so maybe it doesn't stand to reason. But it's a very, very strange, and it's actually unnerving me a little bit. So the fact that it's happening closer to you guys, how do you feel about it?
Not to be a conspiracy guy, but my mind always goes to the government, and that this is
They're already enacting potential new laws for.
This is a way to get people up in arms, and then they can pass a new security thing, and put in some more restrictions or whatever. That I hate to be a conspiracy guy, but that's kind of where my mind.
I think there's something there. I mean, my initial reactions were, this is part of the whole UAP and the kind of slow steps towards disclosure have spoken to me that this is a possible kind of Project Bluebeam that's starting to unravel slowly. And then when this starts happening as well, I know the closer you look at the drones, the less they look like actual UAPs. They look like pretty highly lit drones. But yeah, it all seems, to your point, a way of kind of enforcing maybe some more Orwellian type rules that'll.
We'll tackle that at the end of the episode for sure. That has to be done. It's a must. Tim, before we get into it, I'd like to say as well, fair play on the notes. They're really good. Whether we'll be able to follow them in our drunken stupor, who knows? we'll give it our best shot.
If things go awry, awry whiskey. If things go awry, Allison and I can take over.
Yeah, he was good babysitter.
Okay. We're going to do a lovely rendition of Christmas in Killarney later, though.
Good.
You can't do it sober. You can't. It's impossible.
So, what do Christmas lights look like in Ireland? Like here, they're ubiquitous. The people have them all over their houses, their trees, everything. You do the same over there?
Yes. So I think we have, in modern years, probably, I would say that we've taken a lot from the American kind of culture side of things when it comes to both Christmas and Halloween. And we've definitely talked about it on our Halloween episodes together before, where a lot of the sort of more, let's call it hallmarky side of these things has definitely been absorbed by our culture. Like when growing up as a young kid, me and Eamon grew up in basically the 90s, late 80s, but mainly the 90s was when we would have been kids. And I don't remember half of the sort of stuff that there is now. Nowadays, I drove past the house up in your street today when I was going up to get you, and they had
that one with
cool
Santa in his
stuff.
helicopter.
Yeah, that really cool stuff out the front. And I like all that. I think it's really cool. I think it draws people in, it gets them into the festive spirit. Maybe you could say it's over the top. There is a guy in Wexford who has an insane amount.
Ross Lair, isn't it?
Yeah, he has an insane amount of Christmas lights, and every year for the whole town, it's like the start of Christmas when he turns these lights on, and he's been doing it for 20 years. So I think over the years, and especially in more recent years, we've definitely gotten more into like doing the garden up, and the same for Halloween. Like people are starting to put decorations in the garden and stuff like that. People didn't really do that when we were kids.
No, not when we were kids. It's a really it's a really fun thing. I was visiting my parents last weekend, and when I got there, they were looking after my nieces, and my slightly older niece, she's going to be 6 in January. She just wanted to go around the street and look at the various decorations and stuff.
Yeah,
so as Rob was saying, there's a person on my street. It's a really, really good setup. So they have an inflatable helicopter with Santa in the helicopter. It kind of goes against, I guess, the canon, but you know, we'll allow it. But it's a
he's
really,
not Amish.
It's a really
he's allowed to update.
Sorry?
I said he's not Amish. He's allowed to update.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Change with the times. He's like, if they have UAP in New Jersey, I'm getting a helicopter this year.
Jumping back to Halloween, did the 9-foot skeletons make an appearance there yet?
No.
I don't think we can buy the 9-foot skeletons. We get kind of wraithy, so they're not quite 9 feet. But if you hang them right, their sort of cloaks will make them look like they're quite tall.
How's about you guys? Like, is it a big show for you guys?
Well, real quick, the people have taken those 9-foot skeletons. They just leave them up for every holiday now. they just dress them for Christmas. They'll put a Santa hat on them.
That's kind of awesome.
Santa
skeletons.
Oh, yeah, it's Krampusnacht.
As far as us decorating, well, again, Allison's a Grinch, so we will put out a Yule goat, which is a Scandinavian thing, and I like the tradition from Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. You guys ever watch that?
No.
Oh, you gotta look it up. It's a Jim Henson thing, but it's fantastic.
Cool. Right,
fantastic. The songs are great in it. Anyway, in there they cut a Christmas branch because they said they could never bear to kill a tree, cut down a tree, so they just cut a branch and they decorate one branch. So I kind of like that tradition. So I took that from there. Yeah. So I go out in the woods and I'll cut a Christmas branch.
That's cool.
That's nice. Yeah, it's funny. That's been a point of contention in my house because I love a real Christmas tree, but I also appreciate the fact that you're basically killing a tree, you know, for no real reason. And my wife is very much like, no, let's just get a fake tree. So we had to I was like, well, look, I don't mind if you want to get a fake tree, we can. But there's something that's very nice. We always had a real tree as when we were kids. I don't even think you got fake trees in Ireland until 1996 or something.
We all had real.
Yeah, we all had real trees. Yeah. But there's a nice smell of the pine and everything. But I do think, to your point, either a small tree, which is like a branch that looks like it, you know, you can just put a few lights around it or whatever, or just a fake tree is probably more righteous.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I love the Christmas. Christmas is my favorite holiday, and it's not Alice. It's mine. I absolutely love it, and I love it because people think like Halloween's the spooky time, but really it continues right on through winter.
Yeah.
As we will see tonight.
Yeah, this is the thing. Your notes are very cool for this episode. Actually, I'm very excited to get into them.
So Christmas has long been associated with lights, from modern projectors to the tangled strands of wired lights with which we all grew up. Christmas trees are almost always lit up in some manner. Often candles are placed in windows of homes during the Yuletide season. As a child, I always loved that look. I don't know do you get that there too, where people put the candles in the windows?
Yeah, we would say that and like the nativity scene in windows. You see, very common. Yeah, for sure.
And I remember pestering my parents to put the electric candles in the windows. They did it 1 or 2 years, and recently Octavian told me that every time he saw them, candles in any windows in any houses, for some reason when he was a kid, he thought the house was haunted.
Oh, that's I get that. Yeah,
like an SOS kind of a thing.
I have no
clue. Like it's a cry for help.
I think he just thought it looked spooky or something. Maybe that's why I always liked him. Maybe he put his thumb on the reason there. I don't know.
Yeah, there is something about actual wax candles. There's a bar in Dublin. If you guys ever come over, we'll bring you there. It's kind of hidden away. It's hard to find, but there's no natural light. They only have these big candles on the tables, and it's it's a really fun. And they, for some reason, I don't know who was in charge of the interior design, but they were they Something was happening with them internally, but they hang up like underwear is hung up everywhere, and there's just these wax candles everywhere. But it's got a kind of a nice spooky vibe, but also everyone, the spirits are the ones behind the bar that you have to worry about more so than the.
Have to tie my hair back when there's open flame.
Yes. It's a fire hazard, to be fair.
So decorating with lights for Christmas has become a matter-of-fact thing we do. But do these practices have stranger origins? The following article appeared in the Sentinel from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, December 23rd, 1927, but it was published in several other papers throughout the United States. It's called Christmas, the Festival of Candles.
Okay. So I'll take the first little bit on that one. Custom and tradition give to candles an intimate association with the Yuletide celebration. They are supposed to scare off the spirits of darkness. Strange beliefs that date back to the prehistoric. And this was by Rene Bach. When we decorate a Christmas tree with candles, the performance has a significance far more interesting than most people realize. For it is really a religious rite of very ancient and pagan origin, and it is meant to scare off the devils. In old days, when a priest undertook to exorcise a devil, bidding it depart from a place or from the body of a person, he did it with bell, book, and candle. The bell was supposed to frighten the evil spirit. The reading of a chapter from the Bible was abhorrent to the imp. And the consecrated candle banished him to the outer darkness, which was his proper abode. The earliest explorers who, disguised as Asiatics, ventured into the forbidden land of Tibet were greatly astonished to find the native priests or lamas performing religious ceremonials, which in some respects strikingly resembled those of the Christian church. The Buddhist altars were illuminated with candles, and bells were used to help scare the devils away. Tibet is frightfully infested with devils. But Buddhism is 400 years older than Christianity, and it is altogether likely that the use of candles and church bells for devil sacrificing purposes, or devil scaring purposes, dates back far into the prehistoric.
Yeah, is that sacrificing or scaring? That's interesting.
Scaring, I think it's
scaring. Yeah, the A and the C mixed around.
Yeah. Interesting.
You're up, Allison.
The origin of ritual use. One should realize that there never has been a really new religion. New faiths have in every instance been grafted upon to old ones. Our own Bible is for the most part pre-Christian Hebrew literature. Any religion that, I can't read that, I'm sorry, that calls itself new, adopts and adapts for its own purpose and forms of ritual that have been long in use. Some theorists have tried to make out that the idea of candles in connection with religious ceremonies originated in the worship, although I'm sorry.
You're all good.
I have a hard time reading.
To read.
Yeah.
Yeah, for people listening only, like the source that we're reading from is like a really old newspaper with like faint ass lines, and I'm looking at it going, how am I supposed to read this after a lot of old wine?
I know. I keep blowing it up and then pulling it back and then blowing it up. Like, which is, I feel like it's the eye doctor.
Big little.
Although that
We'll
we
get
really
there.
know, all that we really know is that their ritual use dates back to a remote antiquity. They lighted the Roman altars long before Christ was born, and doubtless the shrines of Heliopolis in Babylon, where devotional worship is concerned, a special sanctity attached to them. Christmas in former times was called the Feast of Lights because of the multitudes of candles used in its celebration. At one of the Oxford colleges, a gigantic candle was burned down the 12 days of the Yuletide festival. And even nowadays, in Belgium, children carry lighted candles about with them when they sing Christmas carols in the streets. And in Wales, there's a similar custom: people going from house to house with candles stuck on pieces of wood.
Yeah, I do find with the older articles as well. I think we actually may have had this on a Fuzzy Familiars maybe ages ago, where sometimes when you're reading older articles, I don't know if you guys get it on your pod, but like sometimes the English is just different.
Oh yeah.
And your brain kind of scrambles when you're trying to make sense of it. As you're reading it, you're like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It was nowadays like the light at Christmas be hitting different.
It makes me feel a kind of way.
Yeah, it makes me feel
The light at Christmas is kind of sus.
I'll hold space for your feelings on that.
So, a converted festival. In ancient Rome, a like custom was observed in honor of Februa, the mother of Mars, after whom the second month of our year is named. The date of that celebration was February 2nd, and the Christian church took it over, calling it Candlemas Day, and dedicating Candlemas Day, yeah, and dedicating it to the purification of the Virgin Mother. Thus, the festival, very difficult to abolish, was preserved with an altered significance. At the present time in Italy and other Catholic countries, Candlemas Day is celebrated by processions with lighted candles, and there is much rivalry respecting the size of them, many being quite huge, steady now. In Bolivia, and the Feast of Candles is national holiday. Some of the candles are specifically consecrated. Is that right, yeah?
Yeah.
And persons fortunate enough to secure them light them on occasions for protection against devils and witches. One should realize that belief in witches and demons still prevails among the ignorant, even in civilized lands. Excuse me.
Yeah, I don't like that. That's judgment.
Yeah, it is. That is judgment. I feel targeted. So, undoubtedly, the custom of placing lighted candles at the head and feet of a dead person comes from a belief that they frighten away evil spirits. Though not a common practice nowadays, it has by no means gone out of use. Most of us have seen lighted candles in a death chamber, and sometimes one or two were placed in a room where a woman is in travail, the idea having manifestly a like origin to keep demons aloof.
Does that mean, Alison, a woman in travail, does that mean in labor?
I can't imagine what else it would mean. I mean, isn't that the word for work in French?
Oh, yeah, it could be. Travail,
Let me look it up real quick. I can't imagine any more work than that.
It's Travail, yeah, travail. I've never heard.
Oh, something that's painful or laborious.
Okay, so
probably labor.
Right,
yeah. So many superstitions relate to candles, the folklore of old world countries being full of them. One of them is a belief that on the wedding night, a candle should be kept burning in the nuptial chamber. If either of the married pair should put it out, death would be likely soon to part them. It's interesting.
Look, listen to that symbolism. If you pull it out, you put it out or pull it out. Destiny. You got to procreate on that night. It's got to go.
It's interesting, the folklore that emerges from. I'm always fascinated in things that were obviously created in more modern times, right? We've talked about it before. It's in Asia. I don't know if it's either Japan or South Korea. I think it might be Japan, where they have a superstition about fans. They believe that if they run a fan overnight, they'll die in the room because there's something to do with the air and sucking out the air, whether it's I don't know if it's AC or an actual fan, but it's just funny to see folklore when people attach it to like new items. So like a candle at one point in time would have been a new item. So they were like, this will purify you. And you just kind of wonder why
somebody's cousin died and there was a fan on and then it went from there.
But even with the candles, you'd wonder, like, where did that come about? Because obviously, and I'm sure this is a question for Brother Richard, right? Because it's very much a thing over here. You were even talking about it when we just recorded earlier, to light a candle for someone.
Oh, yeah, like an offering, yeah.
Yeah. Like, do you guys do that over there? Would that be a common thing? Like, I suppose it'd be a Catholic thing, right? Would be to light.
Yeah, in church it is. Yeah, absolutely.
But not in the home, right? Not even like a Catholic home, would it, Tim?
Well,
it depends. Depends on the home.
It's funny, yeah. Like my wife is quite Catholic, but she comes at it from like a Brazilian sort of Latin American style. So basically, it's like all the cool parts of Catholicism that don't have the shame that the Irish bits have. So she has like this really healthy Catholicism that I
like a guilt-free Catholicism.
But
diet Catholicism.
She has a saint. We have a little like an altar, I guess, in the corner of the room. And God forgive me, I can't remember the name of the saint, but Paula lights two little candles to the saint and occasionally will just like, touch the saint and then bless herself. But the candles, they're significant in I don't think it's necessarily that she's asking for anything from the saint, but it's just kind of a ritual. Kind of almost like, to be fair, if you think about the ceremony of drinking tea in Japan is almost similar to how we would light candles in Ireland, I guess.
Allison, you know all those like saint candles I have in the window.
Yeah, yeah.
In some Catholic homes, those are lit and they stay lit till they're out. Like Allison would not have that. She'd with too much of a fire.
And are they the ones, Tim, that have the long kind of glass candles and they have the emblem or the iconography of the saint? And yeah, my grandmother would have had those. My grandmother had she had a Jesus with the stigmata and a Sacred Heart. So there was like it was wired in basically so that the heart would always be lit up.
Oh wow!
And it sort of sounds tacky, but it looked quite baroque. Yeah. It was very nice. But yeah, I think in Ireland, there's a big bit about that with light, and then there's probably some more ancient, with darkness and light, and light maybe protecting against darkness and natural predation and all that sort of stuff.
Anytime we get you over here, this place is like Disneyland for Catholics, brother. We're gonna get you.
No matter where you step on Ireland, you're on someone's body. No matter where.
What cool candles we got them. You want Jesus artwork? We got that as well. So. Jesus with lights in their heart and everything. We got that as well. It's going to be class when you go over.
Yeah, it was actually called LEDs. It was marketed.
Divination by candles. The future may be read in the flame of a candle. If the tallow rises up against the wick, it signifies a winding sheet for some member of the family. So that would be like a shroud, like so death. A bright spark in the flame means a letter coming for the person sitting opposite. A notion, obviously dating back to a period when letters were rarities. If a candle burns blue, there is a ghost or spirit of some sort lurking about. Coincident howls from the family dog may be expected. The vicar of Wakefield's daughter saw rings in the candle, which were doubtless wedding rings. If a candle does not light readily, it is a sign that wet weather is coming. This is one of the numerous beliefs, many of them of an ancient origin, that go to compose what the U.S. Weather Bureau calls folk meteorology. Derived as they are from long-time human experience, they have a certain value. When a storm is approaching, the atmosphere tends to become moist, and the candle wick, being thereby dampened, lights less easily. Another notion is that a wavering of the candle flame portends wind. Much superstition has to do with corpse candles, the strange bluish lights that float about in marshy places, and sometimes in graveyards. We call them will-o'-the-wisp, that term having relation to a supposed demon of sorts who carries a lantern about to mislead wayfarers in lonely localities. As a matter of fact, they are emanations of marsh gas. I think they mean marsh gas, which under certain atmospheric conditions becomes faintly luminous. So here, all the way back then, they're using swamp gas as an explanation for weird lights.
It's quite interesting, actually. Yeah.
Later on, they'll say something about weather balloons.
Drones, Chinese drones.
In European folklore, however, the appearance of will-o'-the-wisp portends death, and according to one notion, the corpse candle pursues the exact route that will be followed by the funeral of the doomed person from his home to the graveyard. Candles are mentioned frequently in the scriptures. Job speaks of the candle of the wicked.
Tim, have you done any Will of the Wisp kind of episodes or anything? Because we've actually had requests to do them. I don't think we've done a Will of the Wisp episode yet.
We haven't done any. I've definitely heard you talk about Will of the Wisp.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about them a number of times. This episode's coming pretty close.
Right. Okay. Cool.
But yeah, I don't think I've done a dedicated episode just to them.
It's funny you talk about folk meteorology there, because one thing that sprang to my mind was it was a couple of years ago. I think it was in the west of Ireland. Do you remember this? The Postman. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So it's not so much to do with candles, but we had a postman who just had a natural instinct for what weather was coming our way. And he actually had a better hit rate than RTE, which was our like national broadcaster. So for years, people would just, the weatherman would tell you, or excuse me, the postman would tell you what the weather was going to be. And he was like, 20% more likely to get it right than our national weather service, which was pretty funny.
So in my Hermit's book, which I have finished, it's being edited.
Congratulations!
And index now, thank you. There are several hermits who people went to predict the weather. They were well known. People would go to these hermits and ask them what the weather was going to be.
Nice, nice one.
And we have our own version of folk meteorology here, like when the cows sit down, then it's going to rain.
Yeah,
red sky at night, sailor's delight. Is that what they say?
Yeah, red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. Yeah, all
that's
that sort
like
of stuff.
Yeah,
my hip hurts when it's getting cold.
Yeah, that's what I get. My ears that fall off. So I got big ears. You can see them hanging out over this hat. When my ears feel like they're about to fall off now, that's when I know I'm in trouble.
We had colloquially we call them cartilage Billington.
Like an elf here. Elf on a shelf.
So old-fashioned candles. With the passing of the centuries, candles have gone progressively out of use, and even in remote regions they are replaced to a great extent by kerosene lamps. At Mount Vernon, during the lifetime of George Washington, each member of the family or guest took a candle to bed with him. It was a matter of course custom in those times, when bedrooms had neither gas nor electricity. When the Marquis de Lafayette visited the country in 1825, a magnificent banquet was given in his honour at Richmond, and the newspapers of the day spoke particularly of the brilliant illumination which was afforded by 2 candles for each guest. Standards of lighting were rather different then.
Well, if I come to visit, I expect 2 candles at my place.
Well, we'll get you 3 or 4, man. You have loads of them. King Alfred, as every schoolboy has read, used candles as timekeepers. They were thus employed long after his day, and a few of them are still preserved as curiosities. They were marked off in lengths so that time could be reckoned by their burning, and were presumably serviceable enough for those times, though far from accurate. Considerably later came the time lamp, its oil supplied from a glass vessel and indicating by the lowering of its level, as shown in the graduated scale, the passing of the hours. A practice formerly very common was that of bidding at sales by lighted candle instead of the auctioneer's hammer. An inch of candle was lighted, and the last bidder before it expired became the purchaser. Pepys, in his diary, writes, "We all met for the sale of 2 ships by an inch of candle, where I observed how they do invite one another, and at last how they all do cry, and we have much to do to tell who did cry last."
We did a bit about Pepys before, I think, didn't we?
Rob turned an episode of ours into a Pepys episode, and I had no idea it was happening until it was well and truly happened.
Sometimes it just gets away from you, and all of a sudden you're in the plague and you didn't realize.
But I think someone's going to correct us. I think, was it Peeps? Was that?
It was
Peeps.
Yeah, it was Peeps, yeah. Also an observation, you're like 10 times the reader on wine than you are without wine, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like
my natural state is to be.
I'm like, this fella's killing it. Like, if it's a normal episode when he's sober, he's like,
I'm tripping over my tongue. Yeah, if you give me just 2 drinks, I'm my best self.
I think we're long past that, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. We're getting past that already for sure. Who's up?
Okay. I'm up for
No, it's
candle
yours.
trees and words of foreign origin for me to stumble over.
Have
In
a
the
drink.
Hawaiian Islands, there's a tree with quivering glossy leaves known as the... What do you think that is, everyone?
Kukul, maybe?
Kukul?
Yeah.
Wasn't that Bjork's first band? Anyway.
Yeah.
Or candlenut tree. In former times, the natives of the archipelago... Oh, I always stumble over the...
Archipelago, right?
Yeah, archipelago.
There we go.
Strung the oily kernels of its nuts. I can't do this. I
Calm
was like
down.
a
I'm pouring
12-year-old
out
boy's
wine.
sense of humor.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get back to the oily kernels of nuts.
Well, Rob's got queer illuminance coming up, so
I know.
I have queer illuminance, of course.
On ribs of palm leaves, and use them for torches, each nut in its turn igniting from the one above it. And from the burnt shells, they made an indelible ink which was used for tattooing. Oh, how cool. Very remarkable is the so-called candle tree that grows on the Isthmus of Panama. When its fruits are ripe, it looks as if its branches are covered with candles. I cannot see the word there, so I'm just going to say...
Probably like a Christmas tree?
Oh, like a Christmas tree. In fact, the likeness is so striking that travelers seeing the tree for the first time are sometimes puzzled to know whether the candles are real or not. The impression is even more striking at night when numerous fireflies hover above the fruits, whereby is afforded a favorite joke of the natives, who gravely tell the stranger that the fireflies perform the duty of lighting the candles when illumination is required by the wild denizens of the jungle. In Alaska, a species of herring called the candlefish is commonly used for lighting. In summer, it comes into shallow coastal waters. Is that
Multitudinous.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
All these
multitudinous
made up
schools.
words back then. They used to just make up
I know,
words.
and like it's kind of like fuzzy after the Malta. And so
Yeah.
multitudinous schools to spawn.
Allison
and
should
then
have had a couple drinks.
I know, and then is caught with nets to be dried and stored for winter use. The little fish is amazingly fat and stuck in the end of a cleft stick, and its tail lighted. It burns slowly and steadily with a clear white flame of about 3 ordinary candle power. A good-sized dried specimen will give illumination for a couple of hours.
That is wild. So you just light a fish on fire.
Yeah, that's crazy. So
is it the fat?
Yeah. Must be. Yeah, because I know in like indigenous places like Inuits and stuff like that, they use like the fat from whales and stuff, right?
Like, yeah.
As like
Isn't that where like ambergris came from? The big the perfume, right?
Yeah.
Ambergris was
yeah.
I told a story years ago on the podcast where when I was a kid in primary school, which is like the first or second year that you go to school, we wrote letters away to different soap companies to see if any of them used whale blubber or whale fat for the soap, and none of them were using it. And eventually the one I had written to came back and they said, we do use it. And all the kids in the class went, yeah. We were so excited, happy that finally won. And the teacher was like, no, children, that's a bad thing. They're killing the whales. But yeah, so sorry.
What company was it? It has to be Imperial Leather.
Yeah, I think it was Imperial Leather. Yeah. Shouts out Imperial Leathers. Savage soap.
Yeah. That was fun. Do you guys get Imperial?
Oh, we don't get that.
No, we do not.
No.
You're missing out.
Imagine Celtic mist on speed.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No, Imperial Leather is very British, right? Imperial Leather.
Oh yeah. That's the speed. It brings you across.
Is Celtic Mist like Irish Spring?
We don't.
Yes. When I was in Canada, sorry, it was called. I think maybe it is Irish Spring, and I just called it Celtic Mist.
Funnily enough, we actually don't get that here. We don't get Irish Spring.
I guess not.
Yeah,
they just call it Spring there.
Yeah. It could be just Spring. So Tim has provided me with the article called "Queer Illuminance," which should be interesting. Let's see what goes on here. Folks who dwell in the Shetland Islands, shouts out, not too far from here really, use for candles and stormy petrels, which in that region are numerous, threading wicks through their fat little bodies. Steady now. They also have a kind of oil lamp never seen anywhere else, which is simply a conch shell hung at the end of a piece of sinew. But of all lamps, the most remarkable is in common use in the West Indies. Most properly speaking, it is a lantern made of a gourd, which with many holes poked through, and inside it, to give light, are imprisoned several of the big fireflies native to that region. In the temples of ancient Jerusalem, candles burned, and presumably they illuminated the altars in the famous Temple of Solomon, 1,000 years before Christ was born. Candles in large numbers are ritually used in modern synagogues and also in Jewish homes for purposes of religious devotion. Religiously speaking, there is nothing we know that is quite so old as candles, and their use in connection with the Christmas festival is as pleasing in the way of sentiment as it is interesting historically. Very true. After going through these articles, it's all very fascinating information actually, and as well this article, Tim, that you've provided, there's a lot of stuff that I think it's important to sort of recite because people get to hear new takes on it. But yeah, the sort of gourd candle sounds very interesting, right?
Yeah, filled with fireflies. I mean, we used to do that as kids. You don't have
Really, yeah?
fireflies over there, do you? You have fireflies there? You don't have
No,
fireflies there.
we don't get
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, so we would just put them in a bottle, and
Mhm.
you just have sort of like a lantern,
Really?
made from fireflies. Yeah.
And how long would they last? Like how long would they before they just like enough's enough?
Till we killed them by accident by not
Probably
feeding
till
them
they
and
die.
keeping them
I
in a
mean,
bottle.
the other thing that was really gross that I would do as a kid, because I thought it looked cool, is I would smash the fireflies and then smear them through my hair so that it would glow. Because they had that like phosphorescent, whatever is in them would glow. You could just smear through your hair and then your hair would glow. So quite
You were an average Burning Man attendee before Burning Man ever existed.
Yeah.
With that kind of thing. That's cool, man. No, I think we didn't have anything like that, right?
No, we don't have any kind of phosphorescent animals here.
No,
Really, do we?
no. So if you see any lights at night over here, time to get
It's
spooked.
got to be
really.
fairies.
Yeah, it's got to be
Yeah.
fairies. That would be Will o' the Wisp actually.
Will o' the Wisp.
We have bogs.
But it is
Yeah.
funny you say that. Yesterday, I did a hike. We have a place around Wexford called Fort Mountain, and I was making my way. Skeeter's View is the place I was going to. It's basically you can see a really nice vista of the whole town out, and all the kind of rural areas of Wexford right out to the sea. But there was what was it called? Just the fairies.
There's a little fairy path. Yeah.
They make like a little fairy path, and I just sent Rob a quick picture. I was like, "Oh, about to get got by the fairies." But it is a funny thing because I imagine areas like that in Fort Mountain are probably steeped in a lot of folklore.
Well, yeah.
Like even the rings
Yeah,
around that mound they found. There's a lot of folklore around that as well.
Yeah, so like that area is close to where me and Eamon live. It's like a 10-minute drive, just a little bit out of town. It's a nice little hike. There's not much verticality to it. It's just kind of a hike is probably disingenuous. It's more of a nature walk, really. But it has they found recently like really old ring fort settlements up at the top of this hill. Like that would have been sort of the primary sort of area for civilization. And only recently they found this, like literally only I think in the last 10-15 years maybe. So yeah, it's crazy. This is places just walk
It
on.
does feel kind of liminal as
Yeah,
well.
it does,
Like as I was walking through and it was just kind of coming towards dusk as I was going back, and I was listening to. Did you ever listen to the podcast American Alchemy?
No.
It's very. I'm not smart enough to understand the mathematics and physics stuff of it, but it's basically it seems at least in certain episodes it's tying some of the UAP phenomena, spiritual stuff. That another book, American Cosmic, about the UAP meets religious kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. But as it starts to come into darkness and you're walking back, and the whole area has this very liminal feeling, and I'm afraid of the dog man. So it started to creep me out a little bit.
So I remember the story about a Christmas tree, and I know it was collected by Gerald Milnes, who I think was on the first Christmas show we ever did for Strange Familiars.
Cool.
And he wrote a book called Fiddle, Snakes, and Dog Days, but or rather, he did a documentary film called Fiddle, Snakes, and Dog Days, which is pretty amazing about West Virginia folk tradition. He also wrote a book called Play the Fiddle that covered much of the same stuff. It's either in the book or the documentary, and I can't remember which, he describes this family, back in the hills of West Virginia, and the way they would celebrate Christmas every year is they would take an evergreen tree of some sort, some sort of, Christmas tree. They would light it on fire and they would push it down the mountain.
Oh.
So you just would get this rolling, like flaming tree that would go down the mountain. It's seems like such an interesting thing to me, and very kind of pagan sounding. Like this big ball of fire you're pushing down the mountain.
It does. I think that's probably a really interesting part of some of the American cultures is like some of the stuff that would have come over from like early settlers, like what way they kind of changed folklore, and also like what kind of folklore people picked up and ran with could have been different to what was like widespread in, say, Ireland, England, Holland, all these places where people came over from. Like what people kind of thought was like, yeah, we're going to latch on to that. We think that's cool, versus things that they didn't really like. But that sounds like something that, yeah, people could have ended up running with. Like, what's some of the American folklore that I think is quite cool. I don't know how recent it is, but is it Punxsutawney Phil? He's close.
Oh yeah,
place, right?
Yeah. Well, that's Candlemas, right? That's February 2nd, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like
so how far back does he go? Like, when did that start?
Oh, we looked into that.
Yeah.
I'll look it up real quick. But
Yeah, do yeah.
It's further than you'd think, I believe. It goes back a little ways. And before they used groundhogs, they used another form of another animal, I think.
Another marmot or something.
You know what? It comes from Germany. They used another animal in Germany. That's what it was. And when they got over here, they used groundhogs.
That's what I think is so cool. Like, is that these are things that people thought were worthwhile within the community that settled in America. And then it just became this widespread, like, kind of mainstream thing, because obviously there were so many people coming over. They settled in that area where Punxsutawney Phil or whatever was prior was a thing. And they were like, yeah, we'll do that. And now, like, the Punxsutawney Phil thing is like a mainstream, like, kind of a news thing. You know what I mean? As like it is a kind of a fun thing nowadays. People kind of just look at it as a sort of a funny thing, but it's steeped in folklore,
Well, Appalachia has these pockets, and not so much. Now in the modern world, the whole world gets smaller. But back in the day, there would be these folk music scholars from England and Scotland and Ireland, and they would think that these tunes had been lost. They would find like the lyrics to a ballad.
Yeah.
And oh, too bad, the tune's lost. And then someone over time would turn up some little hollow in Appalachia where people were singing this, and then they'd get the tune again. And here's the tune survived. Same with the dulcimer, the lap dulcimer. They thought in Europe, they're like, oh, it's this weird medieval instrument that nobody knows what it is anymore. They saw it in pictures and stuff, and then they found it in Appalachia. Like people had brought it with them. They were still making them and playing them.
Absolutely, man. It was only recently they found some, Chopin, the pianist, they found some of his works that were just completely gone. So, and now you're getting people doing their interpretations of like new Chopin music, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it is, the folklore behind all that is kind of crazy.
Well, it's funny, yeah, because whatever the burning candles signify, we kind of do that now with little LEDs for the Christmas tree, in a sense, because it's not going to set everything on fire. But it's sort of there's something, I think, almost like that collective. I don't know if it's the collective unconscious or it's just a thing that exists within all of us. But there's something about light, and there's something about natural light as well. Like we really enjoy LEDs, we really enjoy this electrical stuff. But there's something about an actual open fire or a burning candle that speaks to something in
It was
you,
a flex at one point in time. I'd say at one point in time in history, we're talking about new terminology. Having a light was probably a flex at one point in time. Like if you were more civilized or more advanced than the other tribe, you would have light on command, and the more access you had to light meant the more time you could spend being productive, maybe, you know what I mean? Like you had more time to work, more time to do things. Alison, have you found any Punxsutawney Phil lore for me?
I have, and you're gonna take a drink real quick because you're gonna.
I'll take a sip. Right.
The first official Groundhog Day ceremony took place in 1887 in, wait for it, Gobbler's Knob, Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
There you go. Gobbler's Knob. Where did they come up with that name? Like?
Probably a cousin.
I mean,
Beaver Creek, maybe.
I feel like that's its own celebration.
We can add that. True. So we have Intercourse, Pennsylvania. We have Blue Ball, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Bird in hand.
Bird in hand. We can now add Gobbler's Knob.
We have,
but it says it does go back to the 1700s when the German settlers introduced Candlemas as a tradition to America. So yeah, it does. It's a direct link to the German traditions.
See, that's
memories of
very
all
cool. Very cool that that kind of stuff carried over and then became widespread. I'm really fascinated with that type of stuff.
Yeah, the
I
Germans
think,
just took hold and didn't let go around here.
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, they tried to do that over here. We also have some stories of strange lights from around the Christmas season. This is W.I. Evans Wentz collected this account in 1911. So Evans Wentz wrote The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, considered one of the great scholarly works on the subject of the good people, which are me and Rob, good Celtic people.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Pure Celt.
Pure Celts, yeah. Some few weeks before Christmas, 1910, at midnight on a very dark night, I and another young man, who like myself was then about 23 years of age, were on horseback on our way home from Limerick. Just so you know, that's known as one of Ireland's roughest towns, just so you're aware. When near Listowel, we noticed a light about half a mile ahead. At first it seemed to be no more than a light in some houses, but as we came nearer to it, and it was passing out of our direct line of vision, we saw that it was moving up and down, to and fro, diminishing to a spark, then expanding into a yellow luminous flame. Before we came to Listowel, we noticed two lights, about 100 yards to our right, resembling the light seen first. Suddenly, each of these lights expanded into the same sort of yellow luminous flame, about 6 feet high by 4 feet broad. In the midst of each flame, we saw a radiant being having human form. Presently, the lights moved towards one another and made contact, whereupon the two beings in them were seen to be walking side by side. The beings' bodies were formed of a pure, dazzling radiance, white like the radiance of the sun and much brighter than the yellow light or aura surrounding them. So dazzling was the radiance, like a halo, round their heads, that we could not distinguish the countenances, the countenances of the beings. We could only distinguish the general shape of their bodies. Though their heads were very clearly outlined because this halo-like radiance, which was the brightest light about them, seemed to radiate from or rest upon the head of each being. As we travelled on, a house intervened between us and the lights, and we saw no more of them. It was the first time we had ever seen such phenomena, and in our hurry to get home, we were not wise enough to stop and make further examination. But ever since that night, I have frequently seen, both in Ireland and in England, similar lights with spiritual beings in them. Like my companion, who saw all that I saw of the first three lights, I formerly had always been a skeptic as to the existence of spirits. Now I know that there is a spiritual world. My brother, a physician, had been equally skeptical until he saw, near our home at Listowel, similar lights containing spiritual beings, and was obliged to admit the genuineness of the phenomenon. In whatever country we may be, I believe that we are forever immersed in the spiritual world, but most of us cannot perceive it on account of the unrefined nature of our physical bodies. Through meditation and psychical training, one can come to see the spiritual world and its beings. We pass into the spiritual realm at death and come back into the human world at birth, and we continue to reincarnate until we have overcome all earthly desires and mortal appetites. Then the higher life is open to our consciousness and we cease to be human. We become divine beings.
Sounds ominous.
Yeah, I guess I'll see you guys all the next time around, right? It's gonna be a while.
Yeah, what's our podcast when we call it next time?
That's cool though.
It's pretty powerful.
How amazing must it have been? So, I've seen what I consider weird lights in the woods, and
Right.
I spend a number of moments each time I see them, all right, trying to figure out, is there a house back there? Is someone walking in the woods with a headlamp? Is it, et cetera, et cetera. Back then, when you saw those lights, it must have been the impact must have been incredible, because right away you're going, what could it be? If it's not a candle in somebody's house or somebody walking with a lantern, what else could it be? They didn't have airplanes flying around or, drones, etc. It must have been amazing.
Yeah, it's a good observation because nowadays your brain by default almost goes to, oh, it's some kind of technology, right? You go, it's a lamp, it's a drone, it's something. Now, and as we were talking about at the start of the episode where we're talking about, say, the drones over on the east coast of the US, you're like, oh yeah, it's drones. Straight away, your mind goes to that. But yeah, like back then you wouldn't. I remember we camped on an island off the coast here, and there's zero light pollution. And I remember just like we seen stuff like it wasn't UFO stuff. It was probably a plane or a helicopter. I'd say it was a plane. But the night sky was so clear that it was just like it's either a plane or it's nothing. But nowadays, yeah, if you're out on a hike at night and you see something, you're going to default to some sort of technology. I actually haven't done much night hiking, but you do a lot of it, Tim, right?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, I've literally never done a night hike, I don't think. As a matter of fact, when the sun starts to come down and I'm hiking, I probably want to get back to the car. So it's kind of cool that you do night hiking so much.
I mean, I actually prefer day hiking only because my night vision is so bad. I can't really see anything. I like seeing the sights.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I prefer day hiking for that reason. But yeah, I like a good night hike too.
Yeah, it's what I find really interesting about this is the year it's set in Ireland. It's in Limerick and Listowel, so you're kind of going towards the west of Ireland. But it was interesting to see that they kind of, I suppose, were influenced into thinking about reincarnation rather than death in life. And it's funny because that kind of links in with that idea of the revolution of the sun, or our revolution around the sun, rather. Which I didn't think you'd see many texts like that at that time.
Yeah, right.
Kind of talked about
kind of progressive, in a sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or blasphemous, whatever you're saying.
Heretical text. It's really interesting. I think, for me at least, I've always been influenced by sort of some of the Buddhist ideology and the idea of rebirth and reincarnation. It's made sense to me. Not to say that it's correct, but it makes some sort of sense to me.
I mean, as someone who loves nature and you look at nature, I mean, what does it tell you? Reincarnation, everything, new life grows from dead things constantly.
Yeah. And if you've ever spent much time like reading various near-death experiences, it's I mean, even if whatever way you land on, there's certainly a nice feeling of something else that is benevolent that I think this speaks to, which is pretty good.
You've got some Welsh stuff coming up, Tim, and I'm not envious of you having to pronounce some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm apologizing straight away.
I think because even as a Gaelic person, and Wales is also very much Gaelic, it's tough for us to pronounce it properly. As a matter of fact, we butcher
the Welsh stuff, especially. Yeah,
we butcher it quite often. There are similarities. Like my girlfriend is fluent in Irish and she speaks it on a daily basis, but the differences between Welsh and Irish are quite big. But there are some similarities. But one of the big ones is you would see this word here, Egryn lights, and you would say it as Egryn lights, right? But I'm fairly sure in Welsh it would be Egryn lights. I think the Y is a U in Welsh, which is quite sort of a weird one, but I think it is Egryn lights. So just a heads up.
All right.
Just a heads up about the Welsh.
Apologize. Just a blanket.
I will apologize again anyway. I tried to do some phonetic pronunciations for myself, and I'll do my best. I'll do my best. I apologize to any Welsh listeners. It's out of disrespect. It's out of ignorance. Yeah, another series of weird lights, which became known as the Egryn lights, started just before Christmas in 1904 in Wales. These lights began with Mary Jones, a revivalist. This article from the Daily Mirror, February 10th, 1905, details the beginning of this flap.
So before I start, Jones is very much like Murphy. So Murphy is every Irish person.
It's the most common.
Jones is every Welsh person. It's a very common name in Wales.
Welsh Seer and Her Star, peasant woman about whom shines a mysterious radiance. Many witnesses, whole district converted by her marvelous powers. Wales, worked up to a state of religious frenzy by the revival fervor of Evan Roberts, is roused to a state of mixed enthusiasm and dread and the mysterious happenings in the county of Merionshire. On the lonely farm of Islowfirth, a couple miles from the Dufferin station, midway between Barmouth and Harlech, on the Cambrian Railway. Wow. This is Mary Jones.
You did it. You're almost there.
You're doing so good. You're doing so good.
Over whom rests a mysterious heavenly light as she goes about her revival work in the surrounding county. Though a regular churchgoer and communicant for 17 years, Mrs. Jones' conversion only dates back about 2 years. Greatly impressed by the work which Evan Roberts was doing in the south of Wales at the end of last year's, she lifted up her voice in public prayer for the first time and broke down hopelessly. Then, in the privacy of her own chamber, she prayed long and earnestly that she might be the means of converting her friends and neighbors. Her service accepted. One night she had a vision in which she was told that what she asked was for another. In the morning she visited this friend and imparted to her the message she had received. "Oh, I can never do it," was all her friend would say. That night Mrs. Jones' star appeared. It was December 5th, 1904. She attended the little chapel and told how the commission had been refused, and my service is accepted, she said. From that moment she set about her new work, and within a fortnight, all but 4 of the friends and neighbors whom she had prayed to be allowed to convert had publicly professed their conversion. Led by her star and light, she then extended her mission, and the 4 chapels and 2 churches at Dufferin fell under her influence almost at once. And the mysterious lights and star, they have been seen all over the district in which she has so far carried on her work. It extends from Criccieth and in the north to Aberdovey, 40 miles to the south. When she arrived at Criccieth by train, the star was seen shining in the house in which she was to stay. At Harlech, the lights were watched by dozens of people. Mrs. Jones never sets out upon a mission unless the light is ready to accompany her, and it returns with her after the mission is accomplished. Herself quite ready for her meeting, Mrs. Jones awaits for the coming of the star. Suddenly it springs into being, brilliantly white and infinitely larger than any other star, like a powerful light hanging in the heavens some 2 miles away. It is impossible to suggest that it is an ordinary star, for it is to be seen when the sky is clouded, and its size is infinitely too great. From its surface flash rays, as if from some enormous diamond. Perhaps it may remain steady, or perhaps again it may make a sudden great jump into the heavens, dropping at once to its old position, but all the time seeming to advance rapidly towards the missionary. But the star soon gives place to the light. It appears as suddenly as it first came into being, while on the distant hillside, miles maybe, from when the star had last shone, breaks out a patch of softest radiance, but lighting up the heather as though with brilliant sunshine. Then appearing and disappearing, the light travels in the direction Mrs. Jones is to take upon her mission. But the lights are not always like this. Occasionally they take the form of brilliant beams of light flashing from hill to hill across the road before, illuminating every detail of the path on which they strike with the clearness of a searchlight. At other times the light will appear as a blood-red lamp upon the path before her, and the woman herself. There is nothing about her to attract attention. For 38 years she resided in the district unnoticed. Her attainments are most ordinary, and her education is that of her class, the peasant class. As already stated, the mysterious manifestations have been seen by numberless persons, among them several clergymen, professional men, and journalists. Here are some of the representative names. The Reverend Roger Williams, pastor of the Congregational Church at Dufferin. Mr. Beriah Evans, a well-known journalist and correspondent of the Yorkshire Post. The Reverend Llewellyn Morgan of Harlech. He was one of a crowd of several dozens of persons who watched the lights at Harlech. Mr. Evans Thomas, a solicitor of Machynlleth. With a number of others, he accompanied Mrs. Jones to a meeting at Aberdovey. These were ready to testify, and they have already done so, of what they have seen. In each case, their evidence, though taken separately, corresponds with that of each of them and of Mrs. Jones herself. I would like to thank our patrons. Thank you so much, patrons. We could not make Strange Familiars without your help. Strange Familiars exists because of our patrons. If you like Strange Familiars and you'd like to help us make the show and get extra content besides, you can become a patron at Patreon. Patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly show, as well as extra shows every month. We do at least one extra show for our patrons every month. To check it out, again, go to patreon.com/strangefamiliars. We also have a plan at Apple Podcasts. It's called Patron of the Strange there. And our Apple Podcast subscribers also get the weekly shows commercial-free and the extra shows monthly. Thank you, patrons, wherever you're signed up. The Guardian printed more about the lights on Valentine's Day of 1905. Allison will take that, but my good friend lived in McCuntleth. That's why
really?
I know how to say that one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Like I've said it before on our podcast, but Wales is like my favorite place. And I think, Tim, if you went to Wales, North Wales in particular, I think you'd really dig it. It's so Tolkien-esque. It's a magical little spot. It's super cool because like you've got Snowdonia, which is basically a sort of a mountain range up in North Wales, but it's very much like that old kind of Tolkien-esque elfish kind of vibes to the whole place. And all the little towns around there, like we did a meet up there, right?
Yeah.
And all the little towns, everything around there is super cool, right? It's all like kind of little mountain towns, all authentic kind of brickwork and stuff like that.
Very much like, it's an immersive area, you know. It's very nice. I'm really taken by this story as well. I don't know. It's just amazing that the fact that so many people are kind of going, oh yeah, we saw it. Reverence and people, and at that time, what is this, 1905, like that they would have been people in such power back then, and to talk about a woman who was of a lower class and I mean, it says here that she's a relatively recent convert as well, right?
I guess she got serious about it.
There's something. Like, yeah, that's it. Publicly professed their conversion. So I'm not sure the time frames, but it's incredible because it's almost like Christ-like in that, you know, someone who's born who has this access to this, you know, I don't know, cosmic wisdom or something, or cosmic, there's something here.
It reminds me a bit of, so we did an episode on the hermit Kelpius outside of Philadelphia, who was born in Transylvania, came through Germany, and then ended up in Pennsylvania and established sort of a religious group there. But there was these miracles popping up around these guys, like that, you know, like this. It very much kind of reminds me of that these sort of you know, these incredible events. You know, I covered a lot of them from the Catholic angle in the Flowered Path, but they happened outside too. You know, Wales was Protestant for sure.
Absolutely,
the Reverend Roger Williams. Yeah, we don't have reverence in Catholicism. It's a really fascinating story.
Yeah. Wales is a cool spot for sure for all that. Alison, what's up next?
So this is from The Guardian on Valentine's Day 1905. Go ahead, Alison.
While everybody speaks of Mrs. Mary Jones with great respect, a good many of her neighbors smile when the lights are mentioned. They have not seen them. They were always sweeping the heavens with their eyes. One man saw two arc-like lights one night when they were neither stars nor lamplights, but may, he thinks, have been produced in some oblique way by the rays of the moon. At the same time, he noticed as he walked along that the air contained quite a succession of hot currents, which gave an odor as of the earth after a summer shower. This was at midnight in January. I have often Mrs. Jones driving to revival meetings, said this man, but I have never seen any lights attending her, except the lights of her trap. A woman who thoroughly believes in the light says she saw a large star one evening as she was going into chapel, nearly as big as the moon, well, not quite so big, and of a bluish color. It had disappeared when she came out of chapel 2 hours later. The woman's husband saw a much stranger thing one night. There was a great light in the sky, and in front of it there were 2 legs, as of a man, but nothing more. At the revival meeting that night, he and his friends prayed for a notorious local drunkard by his name, and as they were praying, the drunkard walked in and gave himself to Christ. Another states as follows: the lights generally come when it is time for Mrs. Jones to dress for her meeting. One night, 2 girls drove her home from Harlech in their father's trap, and they had the lights not only all the way to Egryn, but back again to their own house in Harlech. Though I was not fortunate enough to meet anyone besides Mrs. Jones who had seen the lights, I talked with many who knew others who had. One well-known resident was described as having been a different man ever since he had beheld the signs, and a London minister was said to have been so affected by the sight that he had afterwards been in bed for a fortnight. Taking the existence of the lights to be admitted, and there seems to be abundant evidence, it may be hoped that some competent inquiry will be directed as to their cause. Has the St. Tudwell Lighthouse on the other side of Tremadoc Bay anything to do with them, or have any experiments in the atmosphere been undertaken within the last 2 months, which might have some unlooked-for results, perhaps at a distance? As against the purely physical character of the lights, they are said to be at the same time visible to some and invisible to others.
That's an interesting note.
Yeah, that last part especially, for sure.
I think we
also the part with the 2 legs.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 2 legs part is definitely, I was thinking, like, what were they meaning by that? Because I think we stayed in Tremadoc close enough to
We
it.
were there, yeah.
Yeah, I think nowadays it's got a G at the end rather than a C. Tremadoc, I think, is what it is. But I've definitely stayed around that area. It's not actually, there's Portmadig and there's Tremadoc, and I think they're both kind of close by to each other. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not far from here. Really.
Yeah. I do find it really interesting that bit about some people being able to observe the lights and others not. That's because that would negate the ideas that they've said there about a potential, Tudwell lighthouse. If some people can see it, unless like some people are making extremely long blinks at the time it takes the light to revolve or whatever. But it's really interesting.
Puts it squarely in the paranormal category.
100%, 100%.
How often do we hear that? Like, one person saw him, one person didn't.
Yeah.
And we've talked about those really cool stories where they both see what we might describe as the same entity, but it presents itself in different ways.
And this is 1905,
Yeah, exactly. They just don't have the framework, that we have, the benefit of time and all these cases collected and the internet and all we have to put it together. They just don't have the benefit of that. So they're just reporting what they saw.
Do you think that it's possible that because I feel like, and when I say this, I talk about myself as well, like we're so addled with the access we have to, let's just call it entertainment, whatever it is, that we're very rarely in a situation where actually we're in a headspace where we might be able to see something that exists sort of on the veil between 2 places.
I mean, it may be entertainment. It may just be the fact that we live so far away from nature, and as I say, we never have to be cold if we don't want to. We never have to be in the dark if we don't want to. We don't have to feel the change of seasons like we did before. I think we're so removed from it these days that we might be losing senses in a way.
Circadian rhythm, even like even just that basic principle of like waking and sleeping with the light of the sun and the moon and all that, and doing that, like that is not a thing anymore, really. It's very rare that you would meet anyone that kind of does that whole circadian rhythm thing. And actually, like when I was younger, probably, you're talking probably 7-8 years ago now, the supplement like melatonin is really good for resetting your circadian rhythm. It actually really helps with getting you back in sync. And I actually found that really helpful for me, because I was like totally, like I was one of those people who would stay up till like 3 or 4 in the morning, like on a totally unnatural sort of sleep schedule. And I would wake up like way late in the day as well. And I did feel better for kind of resetting my circadian rhythm a little bit. I will say that much,
And sure, everything around you is probably unnatural as well. you know, so you're
staring at
in a
computer
very-
screens all day,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
Well, my job is literally to stare at computer screens for 8 hours a day
Yeah.
and then wonder why I'm so exhausted at 5 o'clock, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. We have here another article from the Young Chronicle here from New South Wales, Australia. It was printed more about Mary Jones on February 17th, 1909. So it was a long time ago. Here's a little clip from the article. Signs in the heavens. Then the signs in the heavens take the form of fire and have now a recognized significance in connection with her ministry. Go to the district and inquire. Druffrin is the next station to Barmouth, and you will find universal credence given to the existence and meaning of these manifestations. Sometimes the sign appears in the heavens above a particular house, and there Mrs. Jones will either have already secured a convert or is certain to do so. At other times, the strange light falls in a dazzling beam upon the roof of the chapel where she may be ministering, the roof standing out in vivid distinctness amidst the surrounding inky gloom of winter's night and plainly visible to startled spectators at a distance. The light does not always appear in precisely the same form. One sees it as three bright streaks of light, each apparently a yard or so in length. To another, it is a single column of fire. To yet a third, it assumes the appearance of ball and fire, which resolves itself in the shape of a fiery hand with the index finger pointing to a particular locality. But each and all have some relation to her mission. Did you find, Tim, when you were putting these notes together, like that, I don't know whether cathartic is the right word, but did you find, like, with your sort of more recent experiences with lights, like, did you kind of find this a bit vindicating? Is there a bit of something like that to it?
It's certainly of great interest, you know, and I just wish I could have seen it. You know, I like seeing this, like it because they're talking about reporters who were doubtful seeing it and people, you know, who were just not, you know, necessarily religious also seeing it, you know. It's very, very interesting. Something was going on. I think we can say that, like what it was.
For sure. She has no doubt as to her being guided by some supernatural power. On her way to a meeting, she will suddenly turn to a footpath or bypath, saying briefly, I am called to visit so-and-so. And if you ask her intimates, they will tell you that Mrs. Jones saw the light the previous evening, directing her to go there. On her way to a chapel one evening last week, she paid 2 visits and in public. Prater later in chapel, she thanked the Spirit for having guided me to the cottage of the old woman who were at close of her day, giveth herself to thee, and to the house of the afflicted widow who now casts herself on thy mercy and places herself in thy keeping. She does not care herself to speak to the strange light, but will tell you, if you are spiritually minded, you are sure to see it yourself.
That's
interesting.
Sort of echoed in the modern day, like if you believe in it, you'll see it. You know, people have said that. You know, if you don't, you're not going to see it.
That's for sure. But I think we do find it more and more now, especially like we've been doing this pod now. We're going into our 5th year now, but it does seem like a lot of people that have never really or wouldn't be the traditional type of people to send in a story have sent in stories and have experienced things that would be described as sort of low-level paranormal experiences, right?
I think you're only ever a handshake away from a legitimate paranormal experience.
Yeah, like everyone has a story.
Yeah,
so
and what's really interesting, and it's funny because you were talking about Christmas being a kind of a spooky time of year, the continuation of Halloween, but actually a big thing about Christmas was telling each other ghost stories.
Absolutely.
And it also maybe speaks to the level of, maybe not ghost stories, but the level of strange occurrences or strange experiences that people would have had. So if you're doing that once a year, you don't want to hear the same story every year. So conceivably, there's so much weird stuff going on, and that could be tricks of the light, whatever you want to say. which I don't believe this is from what I'm reading. But you know, you would have these interesting experiences where every year you can give a fresh update. You know,
yeah, for sure.
It's interesting.
Very fascinating.
The Egryn lights continue to appear around Mary Jones at least until May of 1905. Some of the more interesting sightings include December 22nd in 1904, just 3 days before Christmas. 3 people saw a large light south of the Egryn Chapel, which appeared to have a black humanoid figure inside. The large light was surrounded by small multicolored lights scattering around it. So that's interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen much about the kind of UAP stuff in the congressional hearings, but isn't there one light and it's like a circle with a square in the middle of it that pilots have been seeing?
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't been paying real close.
I may be getting that back to front, and maybe like a square with a circle inside, but it's basically there's something that some of the pilots have been reporting, and it's like a shape within a shape.
Oh wow!
And it's very strange, but it was the first thing that sprang to my mind when I saw kind of a humanoid figure inside a light. January 5th, 1905, at a meeting in Pensarn, a train driver reported seeing lights shooting out in 10 different directions and then coming together with a loud clap. On April 14th, 1905, the Daily Mirror added strange music, unknown voices, and horses refusing to move to the manifestations appearing around Mary Jones. And that seems like stuff that you wouldn't be able to sort of fabricate.
And this is all stuff that happens in other paranormal accounts. Horses stop; they won't go any beyond a certain point. The strange music and unknown voices. That's
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. Yeah, like have you ever been in a room with a cat and the cat's staring at the wall, just doing something, and you can't help but get the heebie-jeebies? Like it's the most natural response. I stayed in an Airbnb before, and when I was going to bed, like literally, there was 2 cats in the house, so that was fine. That it was nice. But one of them just went to the wall and just kept mewling at the wall, and I was like, "This is not good. We need to leave." So this brings us to the miracle of the lights of Egryn. Welsh prophetess, she has a new story of the uncanny flashes. And the first one is of unearthly music. The Barmouth prophetess, Miss Mary Jones, she seems to have leveled up, the Barmouth prophetess. Very good. She is attracting great congregations in Denbighshire to hear the story of the weird things she has seen and heard. At a revival demonstration in...
You've got the
Kevin Moore. I see the brackets, the phonetics. Near Ruabon, she renewed her story of the supernatural lights of Egryn. A lady recently drove in a carriage to Egryn Chapel, and when nearing the chapel, her horse suddenly halted and refused to budge. Simultaneously, an unknown voice was heard exclaiming, "Take off thy shoes, as the ground whereon thou standest is sacred." The lady alighted and beheld mysterious lights which traversed the earth's surface. Mrs. Jones said her assertions had been mocked, but she strenuously maintained the lights existed, even as God did. She recounted an exploit of a London scientific expert who accompanied her from Bontidou to Barmouth, when half the light fell upon them like lightning in thousands of sparks and illuminated the countryside for miles around. 2 other men watched the light, which fell upon Egryn Chapel, and scattered into 10 distinct lights. Electric wires to tap the lights were fixed, but at the crucial moment the lights would not be drawn. A photographer with a camera saw nothing. A strange circumstance occurred yesterday morning. Miss Jane Jeffries, with whom the prophetess is residing, awoke suddenly at 5 o'clock and distinctly heard wonderful music, like horns from Elfland faintly blowing to the accompaniment of mystic singing, which died away as though cut off by closing doors. The prophetess told the Daily Mirror that this was another form of manifestation.
No.
There's so much there. That's the one that hits it home for me. Like there's something was going on there. And again, these people at this time would not have had access to all the documentation of paranormal phenomenon.
No.
They wouldn't have known to put these things together with the lights to make them seem more paranormal.
No.
You know, they just did not have this information. That's which convinces me like something was going on there.
Yeah. And you know what's really funny is the photographer with a camera can't see anything.
Yep.
And this so many times, Skinwalker Ranch being maybe a very famous one, so many times you try to kind of make some kind of chronicle of what's going on. And as soon as you start to try and interact with these things, they say, no. These are my rules. I'll present myself when I know you're here to see. So it doesn't, it's funny. It's like, it's almost like the anti-TikTok generation. It doesn't want, it wants the experience. It wants you to have the experience, but it doesn't want you to have the clout or it doesn't want you to chase it.
True.
That has been my experience and my lesson of 2024 as regards the paranormal, my current position on it, and allow me to change. And, I will as new information comes, but my feeling is that it's very experiential. Yeah. It is meant to be experienced. It is an experience to be had. And it's not something that's easily documented for that reason,
True. Alison, I'm curious to hear your opinion on all this because you're usually on the skeptical side of things. What's your take?
Well, if I heard the horns from Elfland, then I would probably. I don't know.
There's an Irish band called Tír na Nog that I really like, and they have a song called Tír na Nog, and the sort of
of the young.
It says, come with me to the fairyland of Tír na Nog, like going into the sort of bridge going into the chorus, I think. And I turned to Allison one time and
very early on in our relationship when we were lovey-dovey and romantic with each other.
And I said, come with me to the fairyland of Tír na Nog. And Allison said,
no.
You both might end up in Ireland in 2025, so who knows,
we may not be able to bring you to Tír na Nog, but we'll do our best.
That'll be on our Airbnb, in our Yelp review. I was not able to go to Tír na Nog as promised.
Do you know the story of Tír na Nog, the famous Irish story?
Well, I know the story they tell in the song.
About Oisin who comes off the horse.
Yeah.
So that's he lived for hundreds of years, and as soon as his feet touched the non-Tír na Nog land, he was immediately turned into an old man.
Yeah, that's the story.
It actually happened to my uncle. Yeah,
that's true.
It's more common than you'd think. It's more common than you'd think.
If you want to go the Irish love song about Ireland, Thin Lizzy have a great song called "Rushing Dove."
Oh yeah,
it's the last track.
Oh yeah. Is that the one where he says all the famous Irish poets? That's one of my favorite Thin Lizzy.
Tell me a song from long ago. It's a great tune.
Yeah.
Absolutely love Thin Lizzy.
Yeah. So with the lights, what do you reckon, Alison? I'm asking you first because you're the skeptical one, so I'm going with you first.
Oh, I mean, I guess nobody wants to hear some sort of rational explanation, right?
No, I'm actually curious about the logical explanation because I think at the time, my take on it is, sometimes with, what I suppose you would say supernatural occurrences, you would say that they're maybe perhaps derived from whatever's going on in the zeitgeist at the time, whatever's the public sort of general thing. So with the lights, you would think, maybe people are starting to get electricity. Maybe people are starting to get like fancy with their lights.
Maybe my guess would be that it might be more of like a psychological phenomenon, and that you want to be a part of the person who sees the lights, and you want to be the person that sees the lights, and then maybe things that you might not have noticed previously, just something you might have cast aside as being something ordinary, that you now frame in this way that seems more magical, which is, I think, pretty much what the paranormal is anyway. It's just reframing nature in a more magical sense. That's what I guess, and if you're hardwired in a religious sense to have that sort of take on it, it makes sense that if you would want to be a part of that. And so if someone's supposed to have lights about them, and all the people who are true and righteous can see the lights, you want to see the lights too. You don't want to be left out and be like, oh, I guess I'm a heathen who's never going to get to see anything. Which is kind of what I feel. Which is my take on it. Like, that I'm the heathen who will probably never get to see anything.
That's true. You're right. You're dead right. Like that is potentially part of it. Like, I do wonder, like, if we placed ourselves in that time, if we were all from that area and this was all going on, would we be part of the people who say we seen something? Or would we be people who said, we seen nothing, and everyone that says they seen something is talking baloney? You know?
I think I definitely would have been out walking around at night looking.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I definitely. That's
maybe we could just go walk by her house again, just out of curiosity, just see if there's anything happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had never heard of these before. I had never heard of these.
Never. No.
Such a cool flap.
Yeah.
To what extent... Like the people, at the time, was it better to not see the lights or to see the lights? I guess we're seeing we're seeing a couple of, like, she might have been a little bit of a pariah, even though the newspaper is writing about her in such a way. I'm sure a lot of people might have been, witchy, like 1905, 19...
We will say that, like, I don't know whether you guys are privy over there, but like the Daily Mirror is like CAC tier sort of newspaper.
Well, to be fair, like nowadays,
it's what's known as over here. It'd be known as a red top, which a red top is a tabloid.
Okay.
And Daily Express type of stuff,
But that's also 120 years
That's
ago.
also 120
So,
years
like,
ago.
I'm sure that
So it could have changed.
didn't exist.
Because, to be fair, the Daily Mail wasn't a red top, or was a red top back then, but is now not a red top. Yeah.
There's a sort of a wiki page on the Egryn lights.
Right.
And in that, it mentions that at some point the newspapers turned against her, and their reporting on her became much more suspicious and possibly negative. I couldn't find that. I was mainly concentrating on the lights, not and I don't know if this just faded out, if it had a hard stop at some point, they just stopped happening, if they continued to happen for her and it newspapers grew tired of reporting about it. I don't know how it sort of ended, for Mrs. Jones or the lights. I'm not sure how.
I wonder. If we're going off just media, it's possible that again it just wasn't drawing any money. Like that. Like to your point, people got tired of the story. I don't know. It's a really interesting one. It's funny because I'm definitely a bit more woo woo than Rob is, but I'm also have enough of my foot in reality to be like, yeah, I totally see where Alison's coming from. That makes sense.
Eamon is Tim, Rob is Alison for this.
Yeah, to be fair, my heart is in the I believe that something weird was going on. I just don't know how to articulate it.
I actually do think though with this type of stuff where you go far enough back, I think that is a lot more intriguing for me. I think when you in modern times, it's so wishy-washy. There's so many information wars. There's so much disinformation.
There's so much more possibility.
Exactly.
For things to explode out and then be drawn back in.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't think that really I don't know if anything existed to create that.
Yeah.
Is that moving on its own, or did you accidentally bump the skull?
It's.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't.
Okay.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't bump it for a Christmas miracle. No, the disbelievers of the skull.
Nothing. No, literally nothing will beat the story when Brother Richard was on our podcast and he was telling us about exorcisms. And some of the wooden planks popped off the wall.
Pick it up from the floor. It's there. We never seen it. So there's the wooden planks.
Some of the wooden planks literally popped off the wall and hit me on the head.
Yeah.
But he was talking about exorcisms, and I was like, "What in the name of the Lord is going on?"
The two of us shrieked like schoolgirls. It was so scary at the time.
It's
You'll
on
also
video.
notice they didn't pop off on my part of the wall. which may be an important factor.
It's on video.
Yeah.
Like I literally on video looking at it, going like, "Did you just see
We
that?"
need to
Or-
stop the podcast.
It was like short of the lights flashing, we were getting into fairly spooky territory. But Tim, you were saying that you had sort of a bit in your book about like kind of weird lights and stuff, yeah?
Yeah. Do we want to go into them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, this is from my book Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, and so I was collecting all these articles that I think talk about Bigfoot. They call them wild men back then. But I was curious as I was doing it. 'Cause at the time I was doing Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, I hadn't decided to do the whole country yet, which I, like a madman, have decided to do. We'll see if I get back to it, but it's on the list of books I would like to write.
It'll get there.
So, but thinking I was just going to do Pennsylvania, I said, well, let me look up weird lights because I know weird lights are associated with Bigfoot. Let me see if I can find any articles of weird lights. Found a bunch, and then when I was putting this together, I thought, well, hey, I wonder how many occurred around Christmas time, and there was a few in there. So,
Oh, really?
with the Harrisburg Telegraph from November 29th, 1867. Go ahead, Rob.
Cool, yeah. So the story is a strange light. So a mysterious light mistaken for a burning ship was noticed on Lake Erie, which we've actually done an episode around Lake Erie. We've talked about some of the stuff in Lake Erie a week or so ago. The light has made its appearance generally, if not always, in the fall of this year, and usually in the month of November, and almost always during or immediately after a heavy blow from the southwest. A correspondent says, I am told that this light was seen by mariners on the lake as long as 50 years ago, but I am not aware that it has ever been made the subject of philosophical speculation. The only theory that I have is that the shifting of the sands caused by the continued and heavy winds of the autumn has opened some crevices or seams in the rock at the lake bottom through which gas escapes, and that this gas, owing to some peculiar condition of the atmosphere which it comes in contact with, becomes luminous or perhaps ignited and burning with a positive flame.
Yeah, we have swamp gas again.
Yeah, more swamp gas.
Well, what's very fascinating is that this article is from 1867 and that they're sort of hypothesizing this idea even as far back as then, right? Because this is quite, I mean, even to sort of contemplate this idea, I suppose, is quite advanced at the time. And that they were saying that there are what are styled as gas springs in the water all along this portion of the lake shore. It's a well-known fact, and that a highly inflammable gas in large quantities exists at a comparatively shallow depth on the shore. This has been sufficiently proved by the boring of wells at different points. All right, okay, so he's saying that there's gas all up around that lake in some way.
And there is in that area. I mean, there's tons of natural gas wells around there.
Where is that lake?
So it's northwest Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's the furthest tip up near the Canadian border along the lake. Well, it's on the lake, so they get a lot of lake effect snows. And right now they had like last week or the week before, they had 6 feet of snow.
Oh,
Did they really? I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, they had 6 feet of snow. So that now I don't know, would they be like at a spot where they might have been able to see the northern lights at a certain time because of their?
Oh, it's possible. Absolutely possible. Sure.
Lake Erie, there's a cryptid up there. We've done a cryptid episode in Lake Erie, and I just don't know what it is. Yeah, we've like, I don't know. It's not Ogo Pogo's up there, is it? It's a different lake.
I'm so not up on lake monsters.
Yeah, yeah, no. Like
I know
we've done.
that I talked to the guy who from right around there, just Sherman, New York, right on the other side of the border up there, had the sightings of the giant sloths when he was a kid. Really,
wow.
Really interesting episode I did with him.
Well, the giant sloths are
The mean Pleistocene.
Yeah, we've done episodes about them, but giant sloths are super interesting, especially when you see all these caves. Like there's actual legitimate caves that were carved out by them. And again, as a little side tangent, they're absolutely a cryptid that humans at one point in time came across. So you would imagine in folkloric legend, they were passed down through generations. And even if they're not around now, they probably at one point in time were maybe a generation or two removed from people telling the stories, right?
Well, they must have informed our folklore. Like, it must be a wild thing if
Yeah.
you think about it. Let's say some sort of big beast died out 2 generations
Yeah.
ago, but that's still an oral
Man,
tradition.
their
Like,
dens, like a giant sloth, like their dens are, you're talking about rooms the size of this carved out with like their big massive claws.
wow.
And so like you can see pictures of them, like archaeologists and stuff have found plenty of their kind of dens, I suppose you'd call them, where they carve out these holes. But like imagine as a human kind of walking into that when they're extinct even and going, what made these things? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're that it's very fascinating stuff, yeah,
And
for
they
sure.
probably leave their clothes all over the floor and everything.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Lots of
Their PlayStation's
totally
still on.
upended, like,
You know what I mean? The PlayStation's still on, and all there's food still in the oven. Alison, there's a story from Gettysburg there, apparently.
Yes, this is from February 27th, 1860. A young lady, Miss Stewart of Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, was so badly scared a few weeks ago by meeting a will-o'-wisp that she was taken ill on reaching home and in a short time afterward died from the effects of the prostration of her nervous system, superintended by the fright. Or was she a harbinger of the war, which is about to start?
That's true.
yeah. To be fair, dudes were fainting back then.
Mm.
Like, wasn't it Freud and Jung? And when Jung was like, I don't really fully agree with what you say, Freud. And then Freud just fainted immediately. Seems like not a really great way to respond by today's standards.
They took to the bed. as
He's
they
like,
used to say.
what?
You got
The
the
number of times
vapors.
Allison has made me
The
faint, I can't
vapors.
count.
People used to faint. Yeah, it was very dramatic back then, I think.
Oh man, I wish it was still a thing. I'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, I find this email quite troublesome, and I could just collapse on the ground and take a few hours off. We have another excerpt here from the Reading Times, December 12th,
Reading, probably, is
1881.
it?
Reading,
It's
that
Reading,
would be
yeah.
Reading, yeah. But also, you do read papers, so
Did you?
you know, but yes,
Double
Reading-
meaning.
Reading seems correct. This is entitled "A Ghost Scare in Lebanon." On a lot 1 square north of the Hartman House, Lebanon, is a lot in which the ground is slow and marshy, and over this the singular spectacle of an ignis fatuus, or jack-o'-lantern, has been noticed several nights recently, causing considerable uproar. Persons passing that way have been scared badly by the strange moving light, and the place has got the reputation of being haunted. A bulletin board has been erected nearby on which is written, "Beware of ghosts." The Lebanon Daily Times says that the other night a watchman passing near the place was so frightened that his hair stood straight as the quills of a porcupine, and he declared that he heard some queer noises in the lot. On Thursday night at 11 o'clock, several ladies and gentlemen returning from a sociable noticed the strange but brilliant ignis fatuus moving about near the pavement. The heroic young men at once took to their heels and disappeared, leaving the frightened ladies to their fate. Very good. 2 of them screamed at the top of their voices and fainted on the spot once again.
There we go,
A
yeah.
policeman came to the rescue and promptly blew his whistle, which brought along 2 more officers, and they succeeded in quieting the frightened females, convincing them that the light was no ghost, but only a harmless will-o'-the-wisp, and then escorted them home. Have either of you 3 guys, read or listened to Imminent,
No.
the Arizona?
No.
So, Lou Elizondo, I think I'm saying his second name.
Louis
Louis,
Elizondo.
yeah. So, he is one of the main guys who's responsible, say, for bringing forth all these congressional hearings and everything about UAP. He talked a lot about, while this was kind of taking place, there would be these lights, these small lights that would appear in his property, like literally in the house, in the sitting room, and would kind of, they seem to have some kind of agency. Um, certainly to an extent when people he would have over for barbecues and stuff, like multiple people have said they've seen this strange small light, and it kind of gets you thinking about Bigfoot and the lights that you see in the will-o'-the-wisps, and is it the same light perhaps? Because you wouldn't imagine that, like you can connect a line right now to Lou Elizondo. I'm definitely saying his name wrong. However,
Louis Elizondo. Yeah.
Elizondo, right? So but you can collect a line to if there was some sort of technology that would exist for surveillance that the government might use, because he's about to, I don't know, he's talking about disclosing potentially
UFO stuff, sensitive information,
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But then if people are seeing this back in the 19th century, it may sort of indicate that it's not that. It's maybe something that focuses in on you at certain times, or maybe it's focusing in on him because he's, I don't know, trying to publicize more of this stuff.
It's like we're getting to a point now where like it's fairly nuts. I don't know if you read this article. I will butcher it trying to explain it, so I'll just give a little bit of a summary. Essentially, people are saying now that like science as we know it when it comes to space and how it works.
Oh, I sent you this.
Yeah, it's just completely not right.
Yeah, they're looking at
So,
in a really kind of sort of a dumb person's way of explaining it. They've been measuring the expansion of the universe, but when they measure it a different way, the two, I suppose, calculations of growth can't match up.
Yeah,
and they should match up.
Yeah.
So it seems as though the universe is growing disproportionately in certain areas.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating.
Yeah, because it's completely out of our scope of understanding.
And also, we don't have the physics or the mathematical background to actually understand.
But neither do they.
Well, it seems like that's true.
But that's what I'm saying. So if they don't either, then that's when it gets into fascinating stuff. Because like, as far as we're concerned, like we're all just podcasters. We don't like, and especially we're podcasters we're not in that field. So it's not an area of expertise. But if those people who it is their area of expertise are saying, yeah, we don't have a job.
Just waking up one day and be like, oh, so math stopped working. I'm a mathematician. It just stopped working.
Or it only works within the confines of like what we've got right here, but doesn't really apply anywhere else. Then that is like super fascinating.
And to be fair, that was true, 70, 80 years ago when they realized quantum theory, and they still can't figure out how that links in with Newtonian physics, right?
Yeah, but it just means that when like I think what it means for me anyway, or at least what it implies, is like if we don't have a solid grasp on what we can see around us, and that even goes as far as the stars, then what can we really understand? Do you know what I mean? Like if we can't grasp that, it's probably just beyond our understanding, and probably always will be. Which also means that it ties back to the likes of the lights. It ties back to all of these titans and things. It even ties back to religions, right? Because you operate under this idea that like, oh, we do have an understanding of these things scientifically. And you kind of go, okay, cool, I'll trust in that.
And you realize you don't.
But then if they're turning around and saying, actually, lads, that whole thing that we said is not necessarily where
all
we're at.
This stuff might be some sort of force of nature or something meant to nature that we don't understand, and we can't.
But for us, because we're all of us are probably of the mind of where, we're open to entertaining a bit more of the differential. Then it makes it a lot more interesting, because it just means that the understanding of what we thought we knew is no longer right. And so I suppose when that happens, then you go, okay, well, the door's open a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think right now the door is more open than it has been for decades.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Decades and decades.
It's
enclosed in every other way on the earth.
It's closed in every way. Yeah.
Can you imagine? It's a really wild idea when you think about it. We're sort of in the grasp of late stage capitalism as spirituality and aliens start to descend upon the earth at the same time.
We have manifested the Chinese curse of living in interesting time.
I think we have.
Absolutely. Tim, you have a story from Mount Carmel, yeah?
Yes, from the Mount Carmel item, Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, December 1st, 1908. A mysterious light. A mysterious light travels nightly over a portion of the lofty mountain. It is as large as an arc light and appears at a regular time every night. Railroad men and others are much agitated over the appearance of the strange light. It was first seen near Malone's along the Delano Mountain a few nights ago. And continuing, this is from the Harrisburg Telegraph, January 15th, 1909. Freeland. Stockton, a mining town 2 miles south of this place, is greatly agitated over a mysterious light that hovers over the spot on the Ebervale Mountain where the body of a woman was found in a barrel 2 years ago, so charred that she was never identified. So that's a creepy ghost light.
Yeah, that's creepy. Yeah.
And finally, from the Newcastle News, Newcastle, Pennsylvania, January 24th, 1919, mysterious light at Newport. A mysterious light on the side of the Newport Bridge is attracting widespread attention. The watchmen at the bridge and residents of Newport claim that the light has been seen for almost a year, but they have not been able to reach any definite conclusion regarding it. West Pittsburghers have just discovered it, however, and delegations have been visiting the place nightly. Spooky, ghosts, swamp lights, and many other theories have been advanced, but none seems to fit the case. I'm guessing they mean spooks, ghosts, swamp lights, many other theories. So that's just the ones I pulled. I'm sure there's many, many more out there, but that's the ones I had at hand.
Do you know
Bigfoot.
Mount Carmel?
I'm sorry?
Have you been to Mount Carmel?
Do you know where Mount Carmel is, Allison?
In Pennsylvania, I'm not sure. No, I have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm
it's
not
so
sure.
big.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania's so stupidly big that.
Yeah, take a look and see if it's far away from you, because like you could have hiked somewhere close by, even, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's in like the coal region in Northumberland County. So 88 miles northwest of Philadelphia and 71 miles northeast of Harrisburg.
Okay.
So it's a ways away from us.
Yeah, I've been up there. I've done a little bit of looking around. There's a great story of a werewolf who a man who they thought was a werewolf, and they shot a wolf and followed the trail of blood in the morning, and then they found a man's body.
Oh.
And they buried him where he lay. They were so superstitious, and that place is called Der Wolfman's Grab, the grave of the wolfman.
Wow.
Which I visited. I actually know where it is. I was shown the exact location of the grave of the wolfman by a guy who's in his probably 70s or 80s now, and he was shown by a guy who was in his 80s in the 1970s where it was. So I've shown a couple people just to keep the folklore alive. Like, we need to know where Der Wolfman's Grab is.
So with Pennsylvania, like, we're kind of more ignorant to it over here, but like there's a big sort of Dutch community over there, right? Is that where it all derived from folklorically? Would it be Dutch kind of? Or...
Well, it's called Pennsylvania Dutch, but it's Pennsylvania German, really. It's so they were saying.
So it's like a bastardization of Pennsylvania Deutsch.
Yeah,
it just sounds like
Deutsch.
Okay, right.
So which is really a combination of like, it's like
Swiss German.
Yeah, Swiss German. The Pennsylvania Dutch language doesn't have a lot in common with German. It's actually more Luxembourgian, which is like Luxembourg.
Okay,
you know, it's just a little tiny country.
Interesting, yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. But so all that sort of Switzerland, Austria, Germany. That's like a lot of the people come from that area.
Cool.
That kind of makes up the Pennsylvania Dutch.
Tim, you made the very cool observation that of the first weird light, which may you tell us about that?
Well, it's the Star of Bethlehem, right? If we're going to do the first weird light of Christmas, that was
isn't it?
Certainly something odd that they followed for many, many months. You know, led them.
Because that whole story that was like, I don't know about you guys. I suppose you guys had it in school too. Like that the whole story of Jesus's birth and all that would have been fairly heavily focused on around Christmas time, right?
Yeah, well, that's still the nativity. Like I was saying, this time of year I like to go to the churches, and they have various different displays of the nativity, and they oftentimes use, you know, large kind of models of the animals and Mary and Jesus and all the rest of them, but they're quite spectacular looking, and I always find it quite a peaceful time to maybe light a candle and remember people who passed. And it's a very nice. There's a very nice, I don't know, for me at least, and I can only speak for myself, is that the only connection, the only strong connection I have, while I'm not necessarily maybe Catholic, but the only connection that I've grown up with that links me with something else is through the Catholic Church, if that makes sense. So I do, yeah, I find it's really nice there to see that. But yeah, that first light that guided the wise men to find Jesus, and even just that whole story when you consider it, an impoverished family, someone who's become pregnant out of wedlock, that her not I don't think was it her husband at the time? The Immaculate
Excuse me.
Conception. Yeah, but sorry,
Yeah,
the
excuse
Immaculate
you.
Conception, excuse me. But
They
it's a
were,
really interesting thing that
They were set to be married. You
Yeah.
know, they
Yeah.
were betrothed. you know.
betrothed, that's it. But even the fact that he said, "Yeah, I'm in this as well." Like it's a really magical, it's a beautiful story.
For sure, yeah.
You know, the most powerful man in the world who was willing to turn the other cheek is probably something we need to hear a little bit more about now.
There you go. Yeah, and whether you make a religion out of it or not,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
good lesson, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do we think about the lights in general? We're talking. I suppose we're mentioning about religion, but like I don't know whether I derive even a religious message from
Yeah,
them.
I mean, so like the Egryn lights, I mean, that last part where they're talking about the horse stopping, the unknown voices, the weird music. I mean, people describe this around other paranormal stuff. You hear it around like the stranger Bigfoot sightings. You hear it around, Skinwalker Ranch and things like that. That's the thing that really took me. I said, okay, something here is going on because again, this is being reported in 1905. They don't know.
No,
They don't have the documentation. They don't have. They can't go to the library and like, let me look up and see what paranormal things I can put in this report to make it, you know, sound like other paranormal reports. And we can do that today. It's the same thing with the wild man reports and those,
Yeah.
pick out the old papers. It's when they're talking about these things that modern Bigfoot witnesses are talking about, climbing on the roof, seeming to know what a gun is and reacting to it. These just odd little features that people would talk about later. I'm like, well, these are sort of like behaviors that they're noting hundreds of years apart. That's what convinces me. More than anything else, I know eyewitness testimony is unreliable and blah, blah, blah. I've heard all that. But when you talk about these very specific things that are mirrored in these other reports, that's what excites me, and that's what really excited me about the Egryn lights. When it's like, okay, not only do we have lights, but now we have the unknown voices, we have the horse stopping, refusing to go any further. We have these weird music. I mean, that brings it home to me.
yeah,
So,
yeah, I
religious
think-
or not, I think something was going on there.
yeah, flesh and blood, like Bigfoot stuff. We sort of over the years of doing research and like doing episodes, and you've done a lot yourself, Tim. But for us, it kind of seemed like early 1900s, maybe 1920s, 30s was when kind of that wave of like proper Bigfoot media started to happen, where it was like wild men out on, like it sort of kind of blew up around then, the same time as like the Mokila Membe stuff kind of blew up. It was kind of all around that time. And I think that was around the time where like newspapers became widespread. Everyone had them. And,
Yeah.
and there was also frontiers. People were still exploring areas. Like the possibility of potentially a Yeti existing was still part of like the ideas that people had. So I think, yeah, back then, but I don't think we associated lights with any of those things. I feel
no.
like, no, I feel like that's all like, I don't know what the right word is, but it's like advanced theory on those ideas, right? Where it's like, yeah, it takes like a podcast like yours or whatever to maybe have like 500 episodes where you've done so many accounts, or maybe say Wes's podcast, the Sasquatch Chronicles, or any of those pods where you have so many accounts that eventually you can corroborate and kind of say, right, some people are saying that there's lights, some people are saying there's this or there's that. Like that wasn't a thing back then. So
And
it does
they
seem
cross
interesting.
over each other as well.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how many times have we heard about Bigfoot sightings and it's accompanied by lights, or that Bigfoot sightings are in the region where you have sort of UFO sightings that people see, or stories of abductions and stuff like that. And it does seem like there's some connection here There's some whether like maybe it's a really physical thing where there's a part of the land that makes people have these strange experiences that don't happen, which you know, I'm just saying, I'm making noise with my face, but there's something that's going on in these certain areas where something just something is happening, and we don't know what it is, and we maybe are never going to be privileged enough to know what it is, and we can try and articulate it in whatever way we can best, but something is happening here, and it's really interesting that if we go back 120 years, something was happening there. And I guarantee if you go back 120 years beforehand, something is happening there. And maybe we become much more intertwined with that something the further back we go, and it's not an external light, and maybe it's something that internally guides us or does something like that. What is happening to Miss Jones here, sort of, and she's sensing it.
The Egryn Lights wiki, in fact, has accounts from the 1600s that are very similar, from the same area rather. So,
it's hard to offer like something like it's something.
It's just, I don't know, man. We
like
we've been doing this nearly 5 years. I know, Tim, you and Alison, you guys have been doing it longer. I find it. I've heard so many of these stories that there's a big part of my brain that just goes, there has to be something here. I don't know what it is. There has to be something. And again, Alison, when I say that, I also completely, there's a part of me that rages against myself as I say that, because it tries to be logical and realistic.
It could be a both end thing. There could have been weird lights. There could have also been people who had such a desire to see them that they were playing into it. You know, it absolutely could be a both end thing.
Yeah.
You'd wonder, we're like, this is one possible explanation, I suppose, if you want to try and be. I suppose boats at the time would have had lights. Would they maybe have been able to see boats on the water, like far out? Like, I'm talking merchant vessels and things like that. But like, really and truly, I don't have a sort of a solid idea of anything where I could say that's what I think these people were seeing. Outside of, we did an episode, I don't know if you guys have done one, on the dancing plague of Strasbourg.
No.
Basically just
fake
like the Saint Vitus dance kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like the 15 or 1600s, I think, maybe 1700s, maybe, was it?
It's arguably more ridiculous, or when I say ridiculous, I mean like more outlandish than what we just talked about.
People were dancing for like weeks and days and dying.
They were dying and dancing.
Yeah, there was like this dancing epidemic that's swept over Middle Europe, and
we did the jumping Frenchman syndrome, which was pretty.
Oh
which was these French loggers up there you could just say to one like jump, and they jump, like they were highly prone to suggestions, and like really interesting stuff like that.
Yeah, you're dead right. That's actually a really good point, because that's kind of an idea that we raised, was like, maybe it was a thing where like one or two people in the town were like, I just can't stop dancing,
But are we looking at that the wrong way again? Like, is that something that's, like these areas of the land that are just liminal in some way, for whatever reason? Dancing as well is a very like human thing. Like, if you put on music long enough and just hang out with a 2-year-old, they'll start jiving before long. They can't help it. It's a very human thing to do.
Alison, what's the skeptical take on it? What do you think?
I don't. Nobody wants to hear my.
No. We're all no, seriously.
On the lights. The lights. I like the symbolism of it. Like, it is in the Western, or in this hemisphere, it's the darkest time of the year, and to have that sort of even a pinpoint of light, to know that there's like hope for the future. I like that symbolism, and it's sort of
very true.
That's a good point.
Maybe that's why we tell the stories, the scary stories of the end of the year, because we know we've survived it, and so we have to kind of like flush that all out to start anew and get a whole nother year of scariness under our belts before we let it out again.
And you look for the mystical lights to tell you that summer will indeed come again.
Yeah, we're looking toward the light.
And it's right, like in that we do this 4 days after we've been at the darkest day of the
Yeah.
year when we
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
light is going to come in. Yeah.
There's a lot as well that gets lost in the sauce culturally. Like we're all not a product of that time, so it's very hard for us to really understand like
Yeah.
what the average person thought of, what was
Mhm.
her sort of, I don't know if iconography is the right idea or term, but like, you know, was there anything to be gained by saying a light appeared? Like, for example, let's just say, was it a thing among the plebs at the time to be to be visited by a bright light, perhaps?
Did it give you
Was
clout? Like,
yeah, did it give you clout? Was it a thing
Well,
where it was worthwhile to say?
I will say this.
Hmm.
I went to so we have a town in Southern York County where they still have church services in Welsh.
Oh, cool, really? Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. And they basically a bunch of Welsh slate miners were moved in the area because we
All
have
right.
slate mines there. And I went there and I've had this theory, long had this theory that people bring their folklore with them.
Hmm.
And so I went there and I talked to the person at the historical society there.
Hmm.
And I said, I want to talk to some Welsh people. I know they must have fairy stories. They
Hmm.
must have. They must have brought them with them. They're miners. They must have stories. And she's like, nah, you'll never get them to talk.
Right.
You'll never get them to talk. And
The
I
Welsh
mentioned it to
don't like
Brother
talking
Richard,
much. Yeah, right.
and he said that's in line with Welsh culture.
Yeah, for
So
sure. No, he's right.
Yeah, he said like the Irish would share these fairy stories
Yeah.
willy-nilly, no problem. Here you go, I'll tell you all about it. But the Welsh are more like kind of locked down about it. So the fact that they're talking about these lights in these articles, it might be something very special.
That is true. That's actually a really good point, actually, because when we went over to Wales the first time, it was me and a group of friends. I've been over a lot of times when I was a kid and stuff. I say the first time, but first time in recent memory I went over. A lot of the time they just seem annoyed by tourists. They're like, what are you doing annoying me by being here even? But what I will say is you're talking about miners. They have a town there. We went through a Bed Gellert. A beautiful town built by miners. It's almost, again, like I was talking about Tolkien stuff. The whole town is built by like mined slate and stuff like that. So all of the buildings there like look like they blend in with the area. It's a gorgeous little area. It's really cool. But yeah, very interesting. Before we get out of this episode, though, Tim and Alison, what do you reckon about all these drones? What's the crack?
Oh, geez. I think I just kind of said at the beginning, I fear it's something the government is doing. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like the U.S. government, if they wanted to take something down out of the sky, could do it.
So,
And the fact
yeah.
that they're not is kind of saying something to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the reason that they can't is because I can't remember the name of the law or the piece of paper, but it goes back to I think the founding fathers, and it does tie in with, and look, I'm not an expert in American culture and stuff like that, but it ties in with the whole American government military can't enact violence on American soil.
Yeah.
And now you made a good point there earlier where you said that maybe it's a ploy to be able to get some stuff through Congress to where they could be able to enact on things on American soil, right?
That is my fear, that it is going to be used in some way to pass new restrictions, essentially.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It could be restrictions or the removal of restrictions would be what it appears to be. Now, what I will say though is I'm probably more of the mind that it's not American. And the only reason I'm of the mind, like of that mind, is as of current knowledge, like as we are talking right now, this episode's going to come out a couple of days later and things change so fast with all this type of stuff. But NASA attempted to track these drones and they couldn't. It appears like what they're doing so far is that they have these drones have a mothership of sorts which resembles like a traditional plane, and from that plane there are sort of what you would associate as like hobbyist drones, like that kind of like
Right, yeah.
smaller FPV drones that come down from that mothership, and they are the ones doing the more sort of on the ground surveillance. The only reason, like, I'm kind of thinking that it mightn't be American is because they seem to be surveilling strictly the air bases that very new American tech is at. And we were saying earlier as well, it's all East Coast. So that kind of rules out, we were sort of floating the idea of, is it China? Is it North Korea? You would think if it was East Coast, it would be more likely to be Russia, right? Because it's the same kind of coast. If you were to go across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe, you're going to get across to the East Coast first, So you would think that that's where they would operate out of. But very fascinating because, like, obviously we talk a lot more probably about UFO stuff. And for 4 or 5 years we've been talking about UFO stuff. I've never really felt obligated to provide information about the stuff we're talking about or to provide footage. But because it's been happening so much, and at the time of our recording here, this had been happening weeks and weeks before I started to mention it, where I was like, oh, I actually have to kind of address this, because it's getting to a point now where, like, we had talked about a couple of things in England and the UK. There was like an orb style UFO.
Yeah,
which,
I remember seeing that.
yeah, which looked quite compelling, quite interesting. But also in tandem with that, there was all of this stuff in American air bases in the UK. That there was things flying over these air bases. Now, I had heard actually one of our listeners works on fighter jets. Is actually maintenance. He's one of those guys, and he actually said to me, and shouts out to him, he knows who he is, but he was saying to me that he was like, I actually haven't seen or heard anything as of right now, but there was so many civilian people and people that were interested in the hobby that were all saying, like, in the UK at the time, this is before they hit America, I think. They were like, yeah, there's something going on. Absolutely. And whether it's a thing where the English government didn't want to say it, or the American government, or whatever. But for whatever reason, they're not shooting them down. So
yeah, and it seems there is bits of strangeness that are going along with it too.
Yeah.
Like some of the ones people have filmed seem to change as they're filming them. Again, I'm not a film expert. Don't know CGI from AI from whatever. So I only know what my eyes tell me when I'm looking at it. Other people have said they've sent hobby drones up towards them and they can't like sort of track them or stay with them or whatever. So whether that means they're just more advanced than your average hobbyist drone, I don't know. But there is some odd stuff that's going with them, and not all of them. Like, some of them do just look like hobby drones. But some of them look weird. Some of them look very strange. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah,
is it the kind of thing where
funny talking about
the other
is
is using the confusion to
information war kind of stuff.
It's all possible. It seems as though if it was an adversary, they would be able to figure it's got to be like one of three. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that you reckon you could figure out quick enough if you wanted to. But I agree with what you're saying there, Tim. Like, for me, it's like parts of it look like, oh, whoa, I've never seen anything like this before. And that's why I was maybe leaning a little bit into, for some reason, is this like the smoke screen that stops you looking at the actual weird stuff that's going on there?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also kind of, that whole idea of Project Bluebeam and fabricating some sort of invasion that winds up letting us all, and maybe we all need that to kind of be less polarized and join together. I don't know. But
have you read
common enemy?
Yeah.
Have you read The Watchmen?
Them.
We don't want any giant squid monsters.
It's interesting, man, because look, at the very least going forward, I think at the very least, at least as far as you guys are concerned, Americans, it's definitely, if it's not American, which it doesn't seem to be, it seems to be a kind of almost like an act of war is too extreme, but it seems like a fairly invasive thing. But as I said to Eamon, like, as Westerners, none of us are privy to the invasiveness of American spy drones or English spy drones. Like, we don't know the carry on of what the West is up to in China or Russia.
Oh yeah.
So
And
like
I
we don't know
guarantee
if
it's
this is
happening.
like America might be looking at this going like, oh yeah, we did that last year to China. Like,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
oh, yeah, cool,
I
you
think
know?
I'm certain of it.
Yeah.
The lights are making a statement. Because what I assume you would want to do is you would turn the lights off and you would stealthily get whatever day that you want to go, and you would move away again. The fact that the lights are on is
very
a message.
brazen. Yeah, it's brazen.
And is it a message from who knows? Because we can say, oh, it could be these guys or that. I don't know if it's there. I don't know whose message it is, but the lights are a message, and it does. It sort of, funnily enough, ties in with what we're talking about here, because this is like this is
modern day lights,
up-to-date Christmas light that we have, right?
Yeah, weird lights around Christmas. I didn't even put that together.
We've come full circle. Yeah, maybe Santa Claus will show up and sort them all out for us.
He's good. I saw that movie with The Rock as Santa Claus's bodyguard. And I'd tell you one thing, I wouldn't mess with him. That's all I'm saying. I wouldn't mess with Santa Claus.
Certainly.
Well, Rob and Eamon, thanks so much.
Yeah.
We gotta move towards dinner here.
Yeah.
You guys.
We'll let you guys have dinner. It's been awesome as always.
Yes, happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all.
We hope you guys have a good one, and to all your listeners as well. Hope you have a happy New Year, happy Christmas if you celebrate it. Hopefully we'll do something in the New Year, the four of us again. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
To the listeners, happy whatever winter holidays you celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Hanukkah. Feliz Navidad.
There you go. All right.
Bye.
See ya.
Before we get to our curiosity of the week, I want to mention, for some reason, the 2 episodes 500 are not appearing right on Apple Podcasts. I don't know what's going on. I uploaded them both, and they look like there's 2 versions of one episode up there or something. It's kind of messed up. Those episodes are free for everyone, and they should be everywhere. So if you're not able to get to them on Apple Podcasts, you might have to run over to Stitcher or go directly to our website.
Yeah, or even are they on YouTube?
They're on YouTube. They should be everywhere else. So you can listen to both, parts 1 and part 2 for free. You don't have to be a patron. They should be available everywhere. Something's messed up with Apple. I don't know what's going on with that. But it's just that episode. It's just 500 for some reason. You can find them elsewhere. In the meantime, I'll try to work out what's going on with Apple. All right. Brought a Christmas owl.
Well, I was trying to find something a little bit thematic, and he's a really pretty color green, and I just kind of went with it.
Yeah. It's an owl of the type that we have been featuring occasionally as our curiosity of the week. Little owl paperweight statue art glass object. Is all that correct?
Yeah. It is if you say it is.
He's sitting on books.
That's the part I like about it, that he's like, a wise owl sitting on some books.
Yeah. This one's a nice, what color green would you say that is? What shade of green?
Jolly Rancher.
Jolly Rancher green.
Apple.
And he's got eyes. The other ones don't tend to have the little stones in their eyes.
Yeah, does he have both of them? Yeah, he does. This is the Westmoreland kind, which I predate some of the other ones, but are for some reason typically less valued. But I actually think like these a little bit more. It's sort of one of the more original molds. I think it's more detailed, and I like him. He looks like he doesn't glow. He's not uranium, but he has a glow to him, especially when it catches the light. He's really nice in a window.
So the green owl will be our curiosity of the week. I'll take a photograph of him or her.
Yeah, now I want a Jolly Rancher.
And I'll put that in the show notes. And if you click on that, it'll take you over to our Etsy shop where you can purchase that or other curiosities of the week, those that are left. While you're over at Etsy, make sure to check out our other wares. My books are there. If you get them on Etsy, I'll sign them before we pack them up. Don't even have to ask. Strange Familiars t-shirts, stickers, patches. Artwork is there, originals and prints. Allison has ephemera there and photos and stuff. Go ahead and check it out. Our shop name is Lost Grave, but if you type in Strange Familiars, you should see our stuff come up. Depending on where you are, we're getting pretty close to Christmas here. But there should be priority mail options available depending on where you are. That should get stuff to you pretty quick.
Tim's a lightning fast shipper, I have to say. He doesn't dilly-dally.
I try to get things out same day or next day. Most of the time I can do that.
This time of year especially. We'll try to make that effort.
Yeah. I'm still doing the Winter Wildman series. So far, most of them have been paintings that I've done. I've been having fun doing those. They've all sold. I think I've done 5 so far. I'll keep doing those maybe through Old Christmas, which is like January 6th or something like that. I forget. As long as I'm in the mood, I'll keep doing them. And as long as it's winter and appropriate, I'll keep doing those. So keep an eye out for them. Again, I'm not doing them like Squatchtober where I'm doing them every day. It's just when I get one done, I throw it up. The silent auctions worked well. May or may not do that. I'll do a mix maybe of silent auction and just throwing them up on Etsy. Mm-hmm. All right, next week will be another Christmas episode. And Brother Richard will be back. So 2 Brother Richard episodes in December. You can look forward to that. We're talking about wild men.
2 wild men talk about wild men.
Yeah, I'm going to drop that episode early next week because I think Christmas on Thursday?
Christmas is on Wednesday.
On Wednesday. Yeah, so I'm going to drop it before Christmas. So
maybe Tuesday.
It'll be early. It'll be Monday or Tuesday probably. People can have a nice listen to maybe while they're wrapping presents or doing something on Christmas Eve.
Hiding in the bathroom from relatives.
Whatever
your jam is.
Whatever you might be doing. So we'll be back very soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Howler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We're on Instagram at Strange Familiars, one word, no underscore. Please give us a follow there. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/Strange Familiars, where you can also join the Strange Familiars gathering group. Strangefamiliars.com/merch is where you go to find Strange Familiars merch, and strangefamiliars.com is open all the time.
Saviors to be, as green as the leaves and as deep as the sea. Well, the holly bears the berry, and what a wondrous sight. And Mary bore Jesus upon Christmas night. Jesus who hung upon a tree, and flowers ever on for you and for me. Well, the holly bears the berry, as green as the grass, and Mary bore Jesus who died on the cross. Mary bore Jesus, our Saviors to be, born in a manger, yet a king was he. Well, the holly bears the berry, as black as the coal, and Mary bore Jesus who died for us all. Mary bore Jesus. the dead. He rose from the dead.